I stared at my father's message on my phone, my hands trembling as I reread it for the third time. 80% of your salary will be for your brother and the other 20% for me. As simple as that. After 4 years of college working 3 jobs to pay my own way while they vacationed in Cancun, this was his congratulations for landing my dream job at Morrison Tech. I typed back with steady fingers. I'll leave with 100%. The consequences, yours to discover. The morning sun streamed through my apartment window as I prepared for my first day at Morrison Tech. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications from family members I hadn't heard from in years. Each message carried the same theme: congratulations on my selflessness, my dedication to family, my generous spirit in supporting Ethan's medical dreams. I called my cousin Emma first. Alondra, I just wanted to say how amazing it is what you're doing for Ethan. Your dad told everyone at Sunday dinner about your commitment to pay for his medical school. Johns Hopkins, no less. My coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the kitchen floor. What did you just say? About Johns Hopkins. Your dad showed us the acceptance letter and everything. Said you'd already signed papers agreeing to be his financial sponsor. He was so proud, talking about how you insisted on covering all his expenses. The room spun. Ethan hadn't even finished his undergraduate degree yet. How could he have an acceptance letter to one of the most prestigious medical schools in the country? I drove to my parents' house, my mind racing. The familiar 2-story colonial looked the same as always, with my mother's prized roses blooming in the front yard. But something felt different now, sinister, even knowing what they'd been orchestrating behind my back. The family brunch was in full swing when I arrived. Extended relatives filled the dining room, and there in the center sat Ethan, basking in attention like a prince holding court. My father stood at the head of the table, raising a champagne glass. To Alondra, who proves that family comes first. Her sacrifice will ensure Ethan becomes the doctor he's destined to be. Everyone turned to me with warm smiles and approving nods. My stomach churned as I watched them toast to my supposed generosity with money I hadn't agreed to give. Dad, can we talk privately? I managed to keep my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. After the celebration, sweetheart, your Aunt Martha made her famous apple pie just for this occasion. I spent the next hour fielding comments about my nobility, my family values, my mature understanding of responsibility. Each compliment felt like another bar in a cage they were constructing around me. Ethan avoided my eyes, focusing intently on his third helping of pot roast. When the crowd finally thinned, Aunt Martha approached me near the kitchen. Unlike the others, her expression held concern rather than celebration. Alondra, dear, can we step outside for a moment? On the back porch, she glanced around nervously before pulling out her phone. I need to show you something. I work at Fairfield Credit Union, you know. I shouldn't be doing this, but I've watched you grow up, and this isn't right. She showed me a series of loan documents on her screen. My name appeared on each one, student loans totaling over $60,000. The signatures looked like mine, but I knew I'd never signed them. These loans were taken out over the past 4 years, Martha whispered. The money went into an account controlled by your parents. I noticed because the deposits coincided with large purchases, a new boat vacation packages, even a down payment on a rental property. My legs felt weak. I worked 3 jobs through college. I ate ramen for months to afford textbooks. While they were using money stolen in my name, Martha gripped my hand. I've seen this before with other families. Financial abuse disguised as tradition or duty. I took screenshots of everything. You'll need them. Back inside, my father had moved to his studies, surrounding himself with financial documents. He looked up with that same proud smile that used to mean safety and love. There's my generous daughter. Come, let me show you how we've planned everything out. The papers spread across his desk made my situation clear. Spreadsheets detailing my expected income, Ethan's projected expenses, and their own maintenance fees. They'd researched my starting salary at Morrison Tech down to the probable quarterly bonuses. As you can see, with careful budgeting, you'll still have enough for a modest apartment and basic necessities. We're not unreasonable, Alondra. Family takes care of family. The same family that stole $60,000 by forging my signature on loan documents? His face shifted, the mask of paternal pride slipping for just a moment before reforming. I don't know what you're talking about. Everything we've done has been for your and Ethan's future. My future or your retirement plan? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Through the window, I could see my mother laughing with relatives in the garden, probably sharing more stories about her dutiful daughter. Ethan had disappeared, likely hiding in his room as he always did when confrontations arose. You have a choice, Alondra. My father said finally, his voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. Support your family as any decent daughter would, or live with the consequences of selfishness. But remember, we know everyone in this town. Your reputation, your relationships, your future. They all run through this family. I thought of Aunt Martha's screenshots of 4 years eating cheap noodles while they vacationed on my name of the lie upon lie they'd built to trap me in their web of obligation. You're right, Dad, I do have a choice. I walked out of his study, out of the house, past the relatives who called after me with confusion. My phone started ringing before I reached my car. Him, then my mother, then Ethan, then numbers I didn't recognize. I turned it off and drove away, knowing this was only the beginning of their campaign to bring me back under control. The acceptance letter to Johns Hopkins was fake, of course. Everything about their plan relied on lies, manipulation, and the assumption that I'd fold under family pressure. They'd calculated everything except one possibility, that I might say no. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I saw Mrs. Rodriguez watering her plants on the balcony. She waved and I waved back, grateful for simple, honest interactions. Inside my small studio, surrounded by secondhand furniture and student loan bills I'd actually signed for, I felt freer than I had in years. My laptop displayed 17 missed emails from Morrison Tech's HR department, confirming my start date and welcoming me to the team. Tomorrow I'd begin the career I'd worked for, earned through my own merit and sacrifice. Not one penny would go to the family who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with daughterly obligations attached. But first I had a lawyer to find and a war to prepare for, because if I knew my parents, and unfortunately I did my refusal to fund their lifestyle, wouldn't be accepted quietly. They'd pull every manipulation in their playbook to break me down. What they didn't understand was that 4 years of working multiple jobs while attending classes had taught me more than any family lesson ever could. I'd learned endurance, independence, and most importantly, that survival sometimes means walking away from those who claim to love you most. The battle was just beginning, but for the first time in my life, I was fighting for myself. 3 days into my new job at Morrison Tech, I was still riding the high of professional accomplishment. My desk overlooked downtown. My colleagues were brilliant and welcoming, and every morning I woke up excited about the projects ahead. That's when the text arrived from my mother. Emergency family meeting tonight, 7 sharp. Don't you dare miss this. I considered ignoring it, but something in her wording made me pause. My parents rarely used the word emergency unless they wanted to ensure attendance. Against my better judgment, I decided to go, if only to set boundaries once and for all. The house felt different when I arrived. Extra cars lined the street, including some I didn't recognize. Through the window, I could see not just my immediate family, but uncles, aunts, and even our family attorney, Mr. Brennan, seated around the expanded dining table. "She's here," someone announced as I entered, and all conversation ceased. My father stood at the head of the table like a CEO addressing his board. "Alondra, please take your seat. We have important family business to discuss." The only empty chair was positioned at the center, facing everyone like a defendant in court. I remained standing. "What is this?" "Sit down," my mother commanded, her usually warm voice sharp with authority. I crossed my arms. Not until someone explains why half the extended family and a lawyer are here for an emergency. Mr. Brennan cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should begin with the documentation, Robert." My father opened a leather portfolio and began distributing papers around the table. "As you all know, our family has always operated on principles of mutual support and sacrifice. Today, we're formalizing these principles. A packet landed in front of the empty chair meant for me. Even from where I stood, I could see the header, Family Financial Responsibility Agreement. We've drafted a comprehensive plan. My father continued, his voice taking on the tone he used when closing hardware store deals. Alondra's salary from Morrison Tech will be allocated as follows: 80% toward Ethan's medical education, and related expenses 20% toward family household maintenance. This includes mortgage assistance, utilities, and a reasonable stipend for your mother and myself as we approach retirement. My Uncle Thomas nodded approvingly. Very reasonable. My daughter supported us for 3 years after college. It's what family does. The documents include automatic wage garnishment authorization, Mr. Brennan added, adjusting his glasses, to simplify the process and ensure consistency. I laughed. The sound seemed to startle them, echoing off the dining room walls. You brought a lawyer and witnesses to strong-arm me into signing away my entire salary. Don't be dramatic, my mother interjected. We've left you with adequate provisions. The garage apartment above Mrs. Chen's house is available for $300 a month. You can walk to work, save on transportation. And I've calculated your food budget. Ethan finally spoke up, sliding a spreadsheet across the table. With careful shopping and meal prep, $75 a week is more than sufficient. They'd planned everything. Every detail of my life mapped out on spreadsheets and legal documents, reducing me to a line item in their financial portfolio. The relatives watched with expressions ranging from approval to discomfort, but none spoke up in my defense. Now, my father said, producing a pen with flourish, let's sign these documents and put this unpleasantness behind us. The family's future depends on your cooperation, Alondra. That's when my mother stood up, holding her phone. Before you answer, I want to remind you of something. She pressed play on a video. My own voice filled the room, younger and full of hope. It was my high school graduation speech, the one where I'd stood before hundreds of people and promised to always take care of my family, to honor the sacrifices they'd made for me. Such a beautiful sentiment, my mother said as my 18-year-old self talked about family, bonds, and eternal gratitude. Of course, you were more mature then, more understanding of what truly matters. The manipulation was masterful, using my own words against me, surrounded by family pressure, with legal documents ready to trap me. They'd probably spent weeks planning this ambush. That girl, I said quietly, believed her family would never exploit her love. She thought sacrifice meant helping each other, not one person being bled dry while others live in luxury. So you're abandoning your promises? Uncle Thomas asked. Typical millennial selfishness. Before I could respond, movement at the kitchen entrance caught my eye. Jake stepped forward, my boyfriend of 2 years, who I thought was having dinner with his own family tonight. Actually, he said, moving to stand beside my parents, I think Alondra just needs to see the bigger picture here. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Jake, what are you doing here? He avoided my eyes, focusing on the relatives instead. I care about Alondra, which is why I support her family's plan. It ensures everyone's future is secure, including yours. I asked, pieces falling into place. My father clapped Jake on the shoulder. Jake understands family values. Once you sign these documents, we'll be bringing him into the hardware store. Assistant manager to start with a clear path to partnership. He's already shown such dedication, my mother added, helping us understand your schedule at Morrison Tech, your salary negotiations, even your apartment lease terms. Everything made sense now. Jake's sudden interest in my work contracts his questions about my financial plans, the way he'd pressed for details about my signing bonus. He'd been feeding information to my parents, helping them craft this trap. How long? I asked him directly. How long have you been planning this with them? He finally met my eyes, and I saw not guilt, but calculation. Your family approached me months ago. They were concerned about your independence. I agreed to help bridge the gap. It's for your own good, Alondra. You'll see that eventually. For my own good, I repeated. Selling me out for a management position is for my own good. It's not selling out. It's securing our future, our future. He emphasized the word like it should mean something. Once you're supporting Ethan and helping your parents, we can plan our life together. The hardware store will be ours someday. The room spun with the magnitude of betrayal. Everyone I'd trusted had conspired against me, turning my life into a business transaction where I was both the product and the payment. Sign the papers, Alondra. My father said, his patience clearly wearing thin. Stop this childish rebellion and do what's right. I picked up the document, scanning the dense legal text. They'd thought of everything. Automatic deductions, power of attorney for financial decisions, even clauses preventing me from changing jobs without family approval. It wasn't just financial support, it was complete control. You know what? I said, holding the papers high. You're right. This is about family values. Hope flickered in their eyes. Values like honesty, trust, mutual respect, love that doesn't come with a price tag. I tore the documents in half, then quarters, then eighths, letting the pieces flutter onto the polished table, none of which exist in this room. The silence was deafening, then erupted chaos. You ungrateful, Uncle Thomas started. After everything we've done, my mother shrieked. Security will escort you out at Morrison Tech when they learn what kind of person you are, my father threatened. Through it all, I noticed Ethan hadn't said a word since presenting his budget calculations. He sat rigid in his chair, staring at the torn papers like they were broken dreams. I'm leaving, I announced, heading for the door. And if any of you contact my employer, if you spread lies about me, if you continue this harassment, I'll pursue legal action for the $60,000 in fraudulent loans. You wouldn't dare, my father snarled. Try me. Jake moved to block my path. Alondra, please, don't throw away everything we've built. We built nothing. You sold a relationship for a job at a hardware store. At least Judas got 30 pieces of silver. I pushed past him, past the relatives now murmuring among themselves, past my mother who was alternating between tears and threats. The last thing I heard before the door closed was my father's voice. You'll be back. When you're alone and struggling, you'll come crawling back. Outside, the evening air felt clean and sharp. My hands shook as I started my car, but not from fear, from relief. The masks were off, the truth exposed. I knew who my real family was now, and it wasn't the people inside that house. My phone exploded with messages before I even reached the main road. I pulled over just long enough to block every number from the meeting, including Jake's. Especially Jake's. The betrayal from him cut deepest because I'd chosen to trust him unlike the family I'd been born into. Back in my apartment, I triple-checked the locks and closed all the blinds. They knew where I lived, where I worked, my daily routines. The battle was far from over, but at least now I knew what I was fighting against. Not just greed or entitlement, but a coordinated effort to control every aspect of my life. I opened my laptop and began researching lawyers specializing in family financial abuse. Tomorrow I'd also need to inform Morrison Tech's security team about potential harassment. The thought exhausted me, but what choice did I have? As I worked, a memory surfaced from years ago. My grandmother, before she died, pulling me aside at a family gathering. Never let them dim your light, Alondra, she'd whispered. Some families nurture, others consume. Learn the difference. I hadn't understood then. Now her words felt like a beacon in the storm ahead. The law offices of Hartley and Associates occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown building. I'd chosen them after extensive research, impressed by their track record in financial abuse cases and their distance from my family's sphere of influence. Attorney Catherine Hartley herself had agreed to take my case after reviewing the preliminary evidence. The forged loans are just the beginning, she said, studying the documents Aunt Martha had risked her job to provide. In my experience, families who commit one type of fraud rarely stop there. We need to investigate thoroughly. Over the next 2 weeks, Catherine's team uncovered a web of deception that made my stomach turn. Credit cards opened in my name when I was barely 18, utility bills from properties I'd never lived in, even a car loan for a vehicle I'd never seen. Each discovery felt like another betrayal, another violation of the trust a child should have in their parents. "There's something else," Catherine said during our third meeting. She slid a folder across her desk, her expression unusually grave. "We found this while researching property records." Inside was a copy of my grandmother's will dated 6 months before her death, 3 years ago. My hands trembled as I read the key passage. "To my granddaughter, Alondra Sinclair. I leave the sum of $200,000 to be held in trust until her 25th birthday or college graduation, whichever comes first." "That's impossible," I whispered. "My parents told me she died penniless. They said her medical bills consumed everything." Catherine pulled out bank statements, trust documents, a paper trail of financial transactions. "Your grandmother was quite wealthy, actually. She owned several rental properties and had substantial savings. The inheritance was placed in a trust managed by your parents as trustees. So where's the money?" "That's where it gets interesting." She showed me a series of withdrawals transfers and account closures. They've been systematically draining the trust for the past 3 years, small amounts at first, then larger ones, always with documentation claiming the funds were for your benefit: educational expenses, medical needs, housing costs. I stared at the numbers, trying to process the magnitude of the theft. $200,000, my grandmother's final gift to ensure my independence, stolen by the very people entrusted to protect it. "How much is left?" "Approximately $30,000. But here's the crucial part. They've been transferring the money into an account under Ethan's name. Based on the pattern, they plan to empty it completely before your 25th birthday next month." The room spun. While I'd been working 3 jobs, eating instant noodles and wearing shoes held together with duct tape, my parents had been spending my inheritance on vacations, boats, and who knows what else. "Can we stop them?" "We can try. I'm filing for an emergency injunction to freeze all accounts related to the trust. But Alondra, there's more you need to know." She produced another set of documents: property deeds, business registrations, investment accounts, all purchased with money traced back to my trust fund. "They've been building their retirement portfolio with your inheritance. The rental property they bought last year, funded by your trust. Ethan's car, your money. The renovation on their house that added 40% to its value, all traced back to your grandmother's gift." I thought I'd reached the limit of anger, but apparently there were deeper levels yet to discover. My grandmother specifically left this money for me. How could they justify this to themselves? In my experience, people who commit financial abuse against family members are experts at rationalization. They probably told themselves they were investing it for your future or that family money should benefit everyone. The fact that they hid it from you suggests they knew exactly what they were doing. We spent the next hour documenting everything, preparing legal filings, building an airtight case. Catherine warned me that recovering the money would be difficult, especially what had already been spent. But, she added, the criminal implications are serious. Trustee fraud, identity theft, forgery. Your parents are looking at potential jail time if prosecuted. As I left her office, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Alondra, this is Janet Morrison from Morrison Tech HR. I need you to come in immediately. We've received some concerning information about your background." My blood ran cold. What kind of information? "I'd rather discuss this in person. Can you be here within the hour?" The drive to Morrison Tech felt endless. Had my parents already started their campaign to destroy my career? What lies had they spread? Janet met me in a small conference room, her expression neutral but not unkind. "We received a call from someone claiming to be your father. He expressed concerns about your mental stability and suggested we might want to reconsider your employment." My hands clenched into fists. "What exactly did he say?" "He claimed you've been diagnosed with several mental health conditions that you failed to disclose. that you have a history of violence, and that your family is considering having you committed for your own safety. The audacity took my breath away. None of that is true. I'm dealing with a family situation involving financial abuse and fraud. They're trying to retaliate because I won't give them my salary. Janet leaned back, studying me carefully. I suspected something like that. His call was too orchestrated, too specific in hitting points that would concern an employer. Plus, he made a critical error. He mentioned details about your salary that only someone with inside knowledge would have. I'm so sorry this is affecting my work. I understand if the company needs to reconsider my position. Actually, that's not why I called you in. She smiled for the first time. Morrison Tech takes employee well-being seriously. We have resources to help employees dealing with harassment, including from family members. I want to connect you with our legal team and security department. We can also provide documentation of these harassment attempts for your own legal proceedings. Relief flooded through me. You believe me? I've seen this before, unfortunately. Talented young professionals, especially women targeted by family members who see them as financial resources rather than people. HR training actually covers this specific type of situation. We spent the next hour setting up protective measures. Security would be alerted to watch for my family members. My personnel file would be flagged with additional privacy protections. The legal team would document all contact attempts. Also, Janet added as we wrapped up, I'm recommending you for our Emergency Employee Assistance Fund. It can provide up to $5,000 for employees dealing with crisis situations. It's not a loan. Consider it an investment in keeping valuable team members safe and stable. Walking back to my desk, I felt the first glimmer of hope since this nightmare began. My colleagues smiled and waved, unaware of the battle raging in my personal life. Sarah, my mentor, pulled me aside. Everything okay? You look stressed. I gave her a condensed version of the situation. Her expression darkened with each detail. Your father called me yesterday, she said quietly. Asked questions about your performance, your mental state, whether you'd seemed unstable. I told him I don't discuss employees and hung up. He called you directly? He's been working through the department directory. I've heard from at least 3 others who got similar calls. Don't worry. We all shut him down. You're part of the Morrison Tech family now, the good kind of family. That evening, I met with Catherine again to update her on the day's events. She'd made progress on the legal front. The emergency injunction had been granted, freezing all accounts connected to my trust fund. Your parents are furious, she warned. They've hired their own lawyer claiming you're attempting to steal family assets. They're also suggesting you're mentally incompetent to manage an inheritance. Let them try to prove that in court. Oh, we will. But Alondra, I need you to prepare yourself. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. People who've been stealing for years don't give up easily, especially when they see their victim as property rather than a person. As I drove home that night, I thought about my grandmother. She'd been a quiet woman, always in the background at family gatherings. But she'd seen through my parents' facade and tried to protect me the only way she could. Her gift wasn't just money. It was validation that someone in my family had truly loved me. The inheritance might be mostly gone, stolen by those who should have protected it, but what remained was worth more than money proof of their betrayal, evidence of their crimes, and the knowledge that my grandmother had believed in my future, even when surrounded by those who saw me only as a resource to exploit. Tomorrow would bring new battles, more lies to counter, additional attacks to withstand. But tonight, I raised a glass of wine to Eleanor Sinclair, the grandmother who loved me enough to try to secure my freedom even from beyond the grave. I'll fight for what you left me, Grandma, not just the money, but the independence you wanted me to have. I promise. 2 months into my position at Morrison Tech, I'd found my rhythm. The work challenged me in the best ways. My colleagues had become friends, and despite the ongoing family drama, I'd carved out a space where I could breathe. That false sense of security shattered on a Wednesday afternoon when Sarah knocked on my cubicle wall, her face pale. We need to talk. Conference room B now. The urgency in her voice made me abandon the quarterly report I'd been reviewing. In the conference room, she closed the door and activated the white noise machine, typically reserved for confidential client meetings. What's going on? She pulled out her phone, showing me an email thread. I've been getting consultation requests from Pinnacle Industries. Nothing unusual there. We often get recruitment attempts. But look at the latest one. I read the message, my blood chilling with each word. The consultant was asking specifically about me, my work quality, reliability, any concerning behaviors that might affect my performance. The questions grew increasingly personal. Did I have stable housing? Was I dealing with family issues that might impact my availability? Had I shown signs of mental distress? This isn't a recruitment attempt, I said. No, it's not. I did some digging. The person making these inquiries recently connected with your father on LinkedIn. They've had multiple exchanges. My hands shook as I scrolled through the evidence Sarah had compiled. My father hadn't just made a few phone calls. He'd launched a coordinated campaign to sabotage my career. The connections traced through business associates, former clients of his hardware store, anyone with even tangential ties to the tech industry. There's more, Sarah continued. Janet from HR intercepted something yesterday. Your father has been contacting our clients suggesting they might want to reconsider working with a company that employs someone with my supposed issues. He's trying to damage Morrison Tech's reputation to force them to fire me. It's worse than that. She pulled up another document. Pinnacle Industries has offered him a consultation fee if he can provide insider information about our current projects. They're our biggest competitor. He's essentially committing corporate espionage. The room spun. My father had crossed from family manipulation into potential federal crimes. We need to tell legal immediately. Already done. They're building a case. But Alondra, I need you to know something. Sarah's expression softened. Morrison Tech doesn't abandon its people. We've dealt with corporate sabotage before, but never from an employee's own family. The CEO wants to meet with you personally. An hour later, I sat across from Marcus Morrison himself, the legendary founder who'd built the company from a garage startup into a tech powerhouse. Despite his reputation for being ruthlessly efficient, his eyes held genuine concern. Ms. Sinclair, I've reviewed the situation. First, let me assure you that your position here is secure. Your work has been exemplary and we don't punish victims for their abusers' actions. Thank you, sir. I never imagined my family would go this far. Desperate people do desperate things, but attempting to steal corporate secrets crosses a line. He slid a folder across his desk. Our security team has documented 12 separate attempts by your father to access proprietary information through various channels. He's been remarkably persistent. The folder contains screenshots, email records, even recorded phone calls where my father pretended to be different people to fish for information about my projects. The deception was staggering in its scope. We're prepared to pursue criminal charges for attempted corporate espionage, Marcus continued. However, I wanted to discuss this with you first. This is your father, after all. I thought about the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd cheered at my high school graduation, who'd also systematically stolen my inheritance and tried to destroy my career when I wouldn't submit to his control. He made his choice when he tried to harm innocent people to get to me. Do what you need to do. Marcus nodded approvingly. There's something else. Pinnacle Industries made a significant error in their approach. Corporate espionage is a federal offense, and their paper trail leads directly back to their executives. We're coordinating with the FBI on this matter. The FBI? When corporate secrets worth millions are involved, it becomes their jurisdiction. Your father likely has no idea how serious his actions are. He probably thought he was just making trouble for an ungrateful daughter. The irony was bitter. My father, who'd always boasted about his business acumen, had stumbled into a federal investigation because he couldn't accept that I wouldn't fund his retirement. There's a final matter, Marcus said. Our investigation revealed that someone has been attempting to access your personnel file through illegal means. They've tried hacking our systems multiple times. Our cybersecurity team traced the attempts to an IP address registered to your parents' home. Each revelation felt like another blow. How had the people who raised me become criminals willing to commit federal offenses just to control my income? We've reinforced all security measures around your information, he assured me. We're also assigning you to our specialized projects team. It has additional security protocols that will make any external interference impossible. Sir, I don't know how to thank you. Excel at your job. That's thanks enough. He stood signaling the meeting's end. Ms. Sinclair, I built this company on the principle that talent should thrive regardless of background. Your family's actions are their shame, not yours. We're proud to have you on our team. Leaving his office, I felt a mix of gratitude and grief. Morrison Tech had become the family I'd always wanted, protective, supportive, and ethical. Meanwhile, my biological family had descended into criminal behavior rather than accept my independence. Sarah waited for me outside along with several other colleagues I'd grown close to. We heard what's happening, David from the development team said. We want you to know we've got your back. If anyone suspicious comes around asking questions, we'll handle it, Lisa from marketing added. You focus on being brilliant. We'll handle being your shield. That evening I worked late partly to catch up on projects, but mostly because the office felt safer than my apartment. Around 8 o'clock, security called my desk. Ms. Sinclair, we have someone here claiming to be your brother. Should we let him up? My stomach clenched. No, I'll come down. Ethan stood in the lobby looking uncomfortable under the security camera's gaze. For the first time in weeks, I really looked at him. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he'd lost weight. We can't talk here, I said. There's a coffee shop across the street. In the neutral territory of the busy cafe, Ethan fidgeted with his cup. Dad's losing it, he said without preamble. This FBI thing has him scared. Mom's been crying nonstop. They want me to talk sense into you. Since they committed federal crimes, Ethan. I know. He looked up and I saw something I'd rarely seen in my brother's eyes. Guilt. I know what they've been doing. All of it. The inheritance, the loans, now this corporate espionage insanity. I've been documenting everything. I nearly knocked over my coffee. What? He pulled out a flash drive, sliding it across the table like a spy exchanging secrets. Audio recordings, emails, financial documents, 3 years' worth. I started collecting it when I realized they were setting you up to be their retirement plan. Why didn't you warn me? Because I was a coward. Because they threatened to cut me off too. Because I convinced myself it wasn't my problem. His voice broke. I'm not asking for forgiveness. But that drive has everything your lawyers might need, including recordings of them discussing their plan to fake medical emergencies, to guilt you into compliance. I pocketed the drive, studying my brother's face. Why now? Because they've started the same thing with me. Now that you're out of reach, I'm the new target. They've informed me that my acceptance to medical school is contingent on signing over my future earnings to them. The difference is, I don't have your spine. You could fight back too. He laughed bitterly. With what I don't have a job at Morrison Tech. I don't have CEOs protecting me. I'm still dependent on them for everything. That's how they designed it. We sat in silence, two siblings on opposite sides of a war neither had chosen. Finally, Ethan stood to leave. I'm supposed to report back about our conversation. Tell them if you're willing to negotiate. What should I say? Tell them the truth, that their actions have consequences, that attempting to destroy my career and commit federal crimes eliminated any possibility of negotiation. They won't accept that. Then they'll learn the hard way. He nodded, looking older than his 22 years. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. You escaped. You're free. Even if it costs everything that's worth something. Walking back to Morrison Tech, I clutched the flash drive containing evidence that could potentially send my parents to prison. The boy who'd once put gum in my hair had risked everything to help me. Maybe there was hope for him yet. Inside my office, I immediately contacted Catherine Hartley and the Morrison Tech legal team. The contents of Ethan's flash drive exceeded even my worst expectations. My parents had been planning this for years, viewing both their children as nothing more than retirement investments. But they'd made a crucial miscalculation. They'd assumed corporate America would be as easy to manipulate as a young woman trained from birth to prioritize family. Instead, they'd awakened a protective giant that took threats to its employees personally. As I prepared to leave for the night, my desk phone rang. The caller ID showed my parents' home number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to my father's message. "Alondra, this has gone too far. Call off your corporate lawyers. Come home and we'll forget all this nonsense. You have 24 hours before we take drastic action." I deleted the message and forwarded the recording to legal. Whatever drastic action they planned, I was done being afraid. I had a real family now, one that valued merit over manipulation, one that protected rather than exploited. Tomorrow would bring new threats, but tonight I was safe in my office surrounded by the work I loved and people who supported me. My parents had taught me that family meant obligation and control. Morrison Tech taught me it meant having each other's backs when the world tried to tear you down. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. Saturday morning arrived with an aggressive pounding on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan standing in the hallway, but something was different. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of movement, multiple figures waiting just out of sight. "Alondra, open up, it's an emergency." His voice carried a rehearsed urgency that immediately put me on guard. I kept the chain on as I cracked the door. "What's wrong?" "Can I come in? I need to talk to you about the FBI situation. Dad's lawyer says there might be a way to fix everything." Over his shoulder, I saw two men I didn't recognize carrying what looked like moving boxes. My blood ran cold. "Who are those people, Ethan?" His mask slipped for just a second, revealing calculation beneath the concerned brother act. "Just friends helping me move some stuff. Come on, let me in. We're family." "Move what stuff? You don't live here." "About that." He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom and Dad said you agreed to let me stay with you for a while. You know, while I prepare for medical school, they said you'd already discussed it." The audacity was breathtaking. I started to close the door, but Ethan wedged his foot in the gap. "Look, they already told everyone I'm moving in with my supportive sister. My study group is planning to use your place for sessions. I gave them your address and everything." "You did what?" "It's already arranged. Come on, Alondra, it's just temporary, 6 months max." I laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. "Remove your foot or I'm calling the police." "You'd call the cops on your own brother." He pressed harder against the door. "That's cold even for you." 3 seconds. 1. "Fine." He yanked his foot back. "But you're making a huge mistake. Dad has a plan to fix the FBI thing, but it requires your cooperation. This stubborn act is going to land him in federal prison. His crimes are going to land him in federal prison. Now leave." "I'm not going anywhere. Mom and Dad pay half your rent anyway." "What are you talking about?" He smiled, that same smirk from childhood when he'd successfully blamed me for his mischief. "Didn't you wonder how you could afford this place on entry-level salary? They've been supplementing your rent all along. That makes me a legal tenant." My mind raced. I'd been meticulous about my finances, carefully budgeting every penny. There was no way. "You're lying." "Check with the rental office. They'll confirm the monthly deposits from Robert Sinclair. Face it, sis. You've never been as independent as you thought." I slammed the door and immediately called my landlord. My hands shook as I waited for her to check the records. "I'm showing only your name on the lease and your payments coming from your account," she confirmed. "No additional deposits from anyone else. Is someone trying to claim tenancy?" Relief flooded through me as I explained the situation. She promised to alert security about potential trespassers and advised me to document everything. When I looked through the peephole again, Ethan was on his phone gesticulating angrily. His friends had abandoned the boxes and were retreating down the hallway. Whatever plan they'd hatched had relied on me being too shocked to verify his claims. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Screenshots flooded in. Social media posts from Ethan's study group thanking me for graciously opening my home, tagged location and all. He'd created a public narrative to pressure me into compliance. Then came the emails, dozens of them, all from Ethan's medical school contacts, expressing excitement about using my apartment as their study hub. He'd given them not just my address, but my personal email, my work email, even my LinkedIn profile. The invasion of privacy was staggering, but it was the calculated nature that chilled me most. This wasn't desperate scrambling. This was planned, coordinated, designed to overwhelm my defenses through sheer volume. I spent the next hour in damage control mode. Security for my building was notified. Emails were blocked. Social media posts were reported. But I knew this was just the opening salvo. The knock came again that afternoon, softer this time. "Alondra, I know you're in there. I'm sorry about earlier. Can we just talk, brother to sister?" I remained silent, documenting everything through the peephole camera I'd installed after the family meeting fiasco. "I'm going to stay right here until you open this door," he continued. "I'll tell everyone in this building how you're letting Dad face federal charges while living in luxury, how you abandoned your family for money." He settled against my door, pulling out his laptop. Through the thin walls, I could hear him typing, occasionally talking loudly on his phone about his mentally unstable sister who was having another episode. By evening, several neighbors had complained to building management about the disruption. Security finally arrived to escort Ethan out, but not before he'd spent 6 hours painting me as the villain to anyone who would listen. The next morning brought a new horror. I arrived at Morrison Tech to find Ethan in the lobby, cleaned up and wearing his best suit, talking earnestly with the security guard. "There she is." He rushed toward me with open arms. "Sis, I've been so worried. When you didn't come home last night, we thought something terrible had happened." I sidestepped his theatrical embrace. "Security, this man is on the no-access list. He should not be in this building." "He said he's your brother, ma'am. Said there's been a family emergency." "There's no emergency. Please escort him out immediately." Ethan's face morphed into wounded confusion. "Alondra, what's wrong? I just wanted to make sure you're okay. The family is worried sick. You haven't been yourself lately." The security guard looked between us uncertainly. I saw Ethan's strategy immediately. Create enough doubt about my mental state that security might hesitate to act. "Check your no-access list," I said firmly. "Ethan Sinclair, added to the system last month, and pull up the lobby footage from the past hour. I guarantee you'll see him being told multiple times that he's not authorized to be here." As security verified the information, Ethan's mask dropped. "You think you're so smart, but I've been documenting everything, Alondra. Every interaction, every refusal to help family. Wait until the medical school admissions board sees how you treat your own brother." "Document this too," I said as security flanked him. "You're trespassing at my workplace. Continue this harassment and I'll pursue a restraining order." Harassment. "I'm trying to save our family. Dad could go to prison because of your selfishness." "No dad could go to prison because he committed federal crimes. There's a difference." Security escorted him out, but his parting words echoed through the lobby. "This isn't over. You can't run from family forever." I was shaking as I reached my desk. Sarah appeared within minutes, having heard about the lobby confrontation through the office grapevine. "You okay?" "No," I admitted. "He's escalating. This is going to get worse." She sat on the edge of my desk, her expression serious. "Have you considered a restraining order?" "I'm documenting everything for one, but he's getting more creative, more invasive. I found out he's been telling his medical school contacts that I've agreed to mentor them, giving out my information like candy." "That's harassment and potentially identity fraud. You need to protect yourself legally before this spirals further." That evening, I worked late again, partly to avoid going home to whatever new ambush might await. Around 7, I was deep in code review when my personal laptop closed beside my workstation suddenly chimed with an incoming video call. The caller ID made my blood freeze. Home security system. I didn't have a security system. Against my better judgment, I answered. My apartment appeared on screen, but the angle was wrong. This was from inside, not a doorway camera. As I watched in horror, the camera panned across my living room, my kitchen finally settling on my bedroom. Like the new security setup. Ethan's voice came through the speakers. I installed it earlier when you were at work, for your safety, of course. How did you get into my apartment? Copied your key last time I visited. Families should look out for each other, right? The violation made me physically ill. He'd been in my home, my private space, installing cameras to spy on me. I grabbed my work phone to call 911 while keeping him talking on the laptop. This is breaking and entering Ethan, and installing surveillance equipment without consent is a felony. Prove it. I'm just a concerned brother checking on his sister who's been acting erratically. I have emails from you inviting me to stay. Remember, oh wait, you probably don't given your recent mental state. What emails? He shared his screen showing a Gmail account that looked like mine but with one letter different. He'd been sending emails from this fake account building a false paper trail of me inviting him to live with me, expressing concern about my own mental health, even discussing giving him access to my apartment. You've lost it, I breathed. Have I or have you, who will people believe? The stable medical student worried about his sister, or the woman who turned her back on family and got her father arrested by the FBI? The police dispatcher answered as I watched Ethan continue his tour of my violated home through the illegal cameras. I reported the break-in, the surveillance equipment, the identity fraud. They promised immediate response. Calling the cops? Ethan asked, apparently hearing my side of the conversation. Good luck with that. I'm already gone in the cameras. Well, they're so tiny you'll never find them all. But don't worry. I'll only check in occasionally, just to make sure you're safe. The call ended, leaving me staring at a black screen. My sanctuary had been invaded, my privacy destroyed, my sense of safety shattered, all because I'd refused to hand over my paycheck. I gathered my things with shaking hands. I couldn't go home, not knowing he could be watching. Instead, I drove to a hotel, checking in under a fake name, paying cash I'd withdrawn from an ATM. In the sterile safety of the hotel room, I finally broke down, not from sadness, but from pure rage. My brother, the person I'd shared childhood with, had become a criminal willing to violate every boundary to force my compliance. But he'd made a crucial error. Everything he'd done, the break-in, the surveillance, the false emails, left digital footprints. Tech companies like Morrison Tech had resources to track such things. And I had something Ethan didn't, a legal team that took threats against their employees very personally. I pulled out the flash drive he'd given me at the coffee shop, wondering now if it was even real or just another manipulation. Everything from my family had become suspect, every gesture potentially a trap. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The cameras are for your protection. Stop fighting us or the footage might accidentally get shared with your colleagues. Imagine their surprise seeing how you really live. Blackmail. He'd graduated from harassment to blackmail. I screenshot everything, forwarded it to Catherine Hartley and Morrison Tech's legal team, then turned off my phone. Tomorrow we'd fight back with restraining orders, criminal charges, and every legal weapon available. Tonight I sat in a hotel room homeless, despite having an apartment hunted by the family that should have been my safe harbor. But I wasn't broken. Every escalation only strengthened my resolve to see this through. They wanted a war, they'd get one. But they'd badly underestimated their opponent. I wasn't the compliant daughter they'd raised anymore. I was a survivor, and I was done being anyone's victim. Monday morning started with Morrison Tech's security chief personally escorting me through a side entrance. The weekend's events had triggered new protocols treating the situation as a serious security threat, rather than mere family drama. We've implemented badge-only access to your floor, he explained as we rode the executive elevator. Only verified employees can enter. We've also assigned you a temporary secure parking spot in the underground executive area. I'd spent Sunday in the hotel while a professional security team swept my apartment for surveillance devices. They'd found 14 cameras and 3 audio recording devices, all illegally installed. The violation made my skin crawl, but at least I had evidence for the criminal charges Catherine was filing. My focus on work became my lifeline code and algorithms providing refuge from the chaos. Then around 11, my desk phone rang with reception downstairs. "Miss Sinclair, there's a Jake Coleman here claiming to be your fiancé. He says there's a family emergency regarding your brother being arrested." My blood chilled. "I don't have a fiancé and there's no emergency. Do not let him up under any circumstances." "Understood. However, he's becoming quite agitated. Should we contact building security?" "Yes, immediately." I pulled up the lobby security feed on my computer, a new privilege granted given the circumstances. Jake stood at the reception desk, his usual casual demeanor replaced by theatrical distress. He wore a suit I'd never seen him own, clutching what appeared to be official-looking documents. As I watched, he began raising his voice, gesturing wildly. Other visitors in the lobby started paying attention, some pulling out phones to record the scene. This was calculated. He wanted witnesses. "My fiancé is having a mental health crisis." His voice carried clearly through the security audio. "Her family just wants to help her. She's become paranoid, cutting everyone off." Security arrived quickly, but Jake had positioned himself perfectly. Every attempt to guide him toward the exit looked like heartless corporate muscle, silencing a concerned loved one. He'd learned well from my family's playbook. Sarah appeared at my cubicle. "Conference room, now. Marcus wants to strategize." In the executive conference room, I found not just Marcus Morrison, but the entire senior leadership team, plus representatives from legal and PR. "Ms. Sinclair." Marcus began. "The situation has escalated beyond standard security protocols. Your ex-boyfriend has been creating scenes at our satellite offices as well. He showed up at our Palo Alto branch, claiming you'd been transferred there and demanding access." The head of PR, Jennifer, slid a tablet across the table. "He's also been active on social media. Look at this." Jake had created a Facebook page called Help Alondra Sinclair. It was filled with photos from our relationship, carefully curated to show happy moments. The posts told a story of a woman who'd suffered a breakdown after starting a high-stress job, cutting off her loving family and devoted boyfriend. "He's gathered over 3,000 followers in 48 hours, Jennifer continued. "He's responding to every comment, painting himself as the devoted partner trying to save someone from corporate exploitation." I scrolled through the posts, each one a masterful manipulation. He'd even included photos I'd never seen, apparently taken without my knowledge during vulnerable moments. One showed me crying after a particularly bad family dinner, captioned, "The stress was already showing. I should have done more." "This is character assassination," I said. "It's worse than that," the legal counsel interjected. "He's been contacting our clients directly. 3 reported receiving calls about their contracts being handled by someone experiencing psychological issues. He's provided just enough personal details to seem credible." My hands clenched into fists. Personal details only he would know from our relationship. "Exactly, he's weaponizing intimacy." Marcus leaned forward. "We're prepared to pursue legal action for defamation and interference with business, but I wanted to discuss something else with you. We've been monitoring the situation comprehensively. This morning, our cybersecurity team noticed something interesting." The head of IT pulled up financial records on the screen. Jake Coleman received 3 large deposits into his personal account over the past month, all traced back to a business account registered to your father's hardware store. Total amount $50,000. $50,000. They'd paid him $50,000 to destroy my life. I couldn't finish the sentence. "It's conspiracy," the legal counsel said. "Paid harassment. Combined with the attempted corporate espionage, this significantly strengthens the criminal case." "There's more," the IT director added. "We tracked his digital footprint. He's been meeting with your father regularly, always in the parking garage of different office buildings. always areas with minimal camera coverage, but our facial recognition caught them. Photos appeared on screen. Jake and my father huddled in conversation, Jake accepting envelopes. My father showing him documents that looked suspiciously like Morrison Tech letterhead. "He's not just harassing you," Marcus said quietly. "He's actively participating in the corporate espionage. We found evidence he's been trying to social engineer our junior employees, claiming to be from IT needing password updates." The betrayal hit differently this time. I'd shared my bed with this man, my fears, my dreams. He'd held me when I cried about my family's treatment, all while planning to sell me out for money. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. "For now, let us handle the legal response. But there's something else." Jennifer pulled up another screen. "He's scheduled a press conference for this afternoon. He's claiming you're being held against your will by Morrison Tech, that we're preventing family contact during a mental health crisis." A press conference. The audacity was staggering. Local news has already picked it up. Tech company accused of isolating vulnerable employee. He's positioned himself as the hero trying to save you from corporate exploitation. I thought about the Jake I'd known, or thought I'd known. The man who brought me coffee during late study sessions, who'd promised to support my career ambitions. When had he become this calculating stranger? "I want to attend," I said suddenly. Everyone looked at me in surprise. "Absolutely not," Marcus said. "That's exactly what he wants." "No, what he wants is for me to hide, to let him control the narrative unopposed." I straightened in my chair. "I've been running and defending. It's time to go on offense." The room erupted in debate. Legal worried about liability. PR fretted about optics. Security raised safety concerns. But something in my expression must have convinced Marcus. "If we do this," he said slowly, "we do it right. Full security detail, legal present, and you say nothing without our approval." 2 hours later, I stood in the back of a small press gathering outside Morrison Tech. Jake had positioned himself perfectly, backed by several of my extended family members I hadn't seen in years. He wore the same suit from the lobby, now accessorized with red-rimmed eyes and perfectly tousled hair, suggesting sleepless nights. "I just want Alondra to know we love her," he told the small cluster of reporters. "Whatever Morrison Tech has convinced her, whatever paranoid thoughts she's having, we're here for her. Mental illness isn't her fault." My Aunt Cheryl nodded supportively beside him, dabbing at dry eyes. She was such a sweet girl, always helpful, always caring. This job changed her. The stress, the isolation, we just want our Alondra back. Jake continued his performance, voice-breaking at calculated moments. "She's accused her loving family of terrible things. Her father, a man who sacrificed everything for his children, is facing federal charges because of her delusions. Her brother Ethan was arrested yesterday on false allegations. This has to stop." That was news to me. Ethan arrested for the surveillance equipment, presumably. Good. "We've created a fund," Jake announced, producing a website on his phone, "for families dealing with loved ones in mental health crisis caused by corporate pressure. All donations will go toward getting Alondra the help she needs." They were monetizing this, actually fundraising off their character assassination campaign. "I have documents here." He continued waving manila folders, showing Alondra's concerning behavior, emails where she expressed paranoid thoughts, text messages about feeling persecuted. Her family just wants to help, but Morrison Tech has isolated her, feeding her paranoid delusions for their own purposes. I'd seen enough. As he paused for effect, I stepped forward from the crowd. Those would be interesting documents to see Jake, especially since I never sent them. The reporters swiveled toward me, cameras following. Jake's face went through several expressions before settling on concerned boyfriend. "Alondra, thank God you're okay. Honey, you don't look well. Come here, let me." "Stay exactly where you are." My voice carried clearly across the space. "And let's discuss those 50,000 reasons you suddenly care about my mental health." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jake's mask slipped for just a second. "I don't know what you're talking about." Honey, you're confused. These paranoid accusations. The only confusion is why you thought banking records wouldn't surface during a federal investigation. $50,000 from my father's business account to yours. Want to explain those deposits to these nice reporters? His face had gone pale, but he rallied. Your father gave me a loan to help search for treatment facilities for you. Treatment facilities, right. Is that what you called it when you met him in parking garages to exchange envelopes? When you tried to hack into Morrison Tech's systems? When you helped plan corporate espionage? She's clearly delusional, he told the reporters, but they were looking at him differently now. This is exactly the paranoid behavior we're concerned about. I pulled out my phone displaying screenshots Catherine had authorized me to share. Delusional. Here are your text messages to my father. Phase 2 of the plan is working. She's isolated from colleagues as requested. Need another payment to continue pressure campaign. The reporters had turned into sharks sensing blood. Questions flew at Jake from all directions. He tried to maintain the concerned boyfriend act, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Those are fabricated. Alondra has access to sophisticated tech resources. She's creating evidence to support her paranoid... Mr. Coleman. A new voice interrupted. FBI agent Sarah Chen stepped forward, badge visible. We'd like to ask you some questions about your involvement in attempted corporate espionage. You have the right to remain silent. Jake's careful composure finally shattered completely. This is insane. I was trying to help her family, said she was sick. Sick enough to justify committing federal crimes? Agent Chen asked as another agent stepped forward with handcuffs. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, attempted unauthorized access to computer systems, and wire fraud. As they led him away, Jake turned back to me, his mask completely gone now. You ruined everything we had a future planned. The hardware store, the family business. You threw it all away for some corporate job. No, Jake. I chose a real future over a con artist who sold me out for money. The reporters surged toward me, but Morrison Tech's security team had already formed a protective barrier. As we moved back toward the building, I caught sight of my Aunt Cheryl frantically typing on her phone, probably warning the rest of the family that their scheme was collapsing. Inside, the leadership team waited in the lobby. Marcus stepped forward with something I'd rarely seen from the legendary CEO. A genuine smile. That was risky, he said, but effective. You turned their own weapon against them. They wanted to make this public. I just gave them what they asked for. Jennifer from PR was already on her phone. The narrative is shifting. Reporters are digging into the family's financials now. That fake fundraising site is being investigated. This is going to blow up in their faces spectacularly. I felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. Another person I'd trusted had proven to be a willing participant in my family's abuse, but at least this time justice had been swift and public. That evening, I returned to my newly secured apartment to find an eviction notice on my door. My landlord had received multiple complaints about criminal activity, family disturbances, and police presence. Despite my lease being valid, she wanted me out. I called Catherine, who promised to fight it, but I understood the real message. My family's campaign had cost me my home along with my peace of mind. Even victories came with casualties. But as I packed my belongings, preparing to move to a corporate-secured temporary residence, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding or defending. I was fighting back, and they were the ones being arrested. The war was far from over, but for the first time, I was winning. 3 days after Jake's arrest, I woke to find my phone flooded with notifications. My mother had discovered social media with a vengeance, and she'd weaponized every platform available. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. She'd created accounts on all of them, each carefully crafted to maximum emotional impact. The campaign was titled "A Mother's Heartbreak: Losing My Daughter to Corporate Greed." I scrolled through posts featuring carefully curated family photos. My first birthday face covered in chocolate cake. Christmas morning when I was 7, hugging the dollhouse they'd saved for months to buy. My high school graduation, their proud faces beside mine, each image accompanied by devastating captions. She used to call me Mama Bear. Now she won't even answer my calls. 23 years of love destroyed by a company that sees her as nothing but profit. I still set her place at dinner every night, hoping she'll come home. The manipulation was masterful. She'd transformed from the woman who demanded my entire salary into a grieving mother, destroyed by her daughter's cruel abandonment. Comments poured in by the hundreds, all supporting her, condemning me, sharing their own stories of ungrateful children. But it was the video posts that truly showcased her theatrical abilities. In one, she sat in what appeared to be my childhood bedroom, holding a teddy bear I'd forgotten existed. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke to the camera. "Alondra, sweetheart, if you're watching this, please know Mama loves you. Whatever those people at Morrison Tech have told you, whatever lies they've filled your head with, you're still my baby girl. Remember when you were scared of thunderstorms? You'd climb into our bed and I'd sing you to sleep. I still sing those songs, hoping somehow you'll hear them and come home." Another video showed her cooking in the kitchen, preparing what she claimed was my favorite meal. "I make this every Sunday just in case she comes by. Her brother Ethan can barely eat. He's so worried. Her father hasn't smiled since she left. We're a family broken." Sarah found me in the Morrison Tech bathroom, crying angry tears over my phone. "Hey, what's wrong?" I showed her the latest post. My mother had shared my elementary school essay about heroes, where I'd written about how she was the strongest person I knew. The contrast between that child's innocent love and the current situation was devastating, exactly as she'd intended. "She's good at this," Sarah said softly. "Really good. 23 years of practice. I managed. She always knew exactly which buttons to push. Have you checked the metrics on these posts?" I hadn't wanted to, but Sarah pulled them up. The numbers were staggering. Her heartbreak videos had gone viral, shared across parenting groups, family advocacy pages, even picked up by local news stations. The narrative was spreading like wildfire. Successful daughter abandons loving family for corporate money. "Look at this comment section," Sarah pointed out. "See anything suspicious?" I looked closer. Between the genuine sympathizers were dozens of accounts created within the last week, all pushing the same message, using similar phrasing, linking to the same fundraising page Jake had mentioned. "She's buying engagement," or "someone is. This is a coordinated campaign, professional level." We dug deeper. The fundraising page had been redesigned, now featuring my mother's videos prominently. Help the Sinclair Family Reunite had raised over $12,000 in 3 days, the money ostensibly for family counseling and legal fees to bring their daughter home. Catherine called while we were still analyzing the social media assault. "We have a problem. Your mother has been contacting your college friends, high school classmates, even teachers from middle school. She's offering them money to share negative stories about you." "What kind of stories?" "Anything that fits her narrative. Times you were selfish, argumentative, difficult. She's particularly interested in anyone who can claim you showed signs of mental instability." My stomach churned. "And people are taking her up on it." "A few. I'm already sending cease and desist letters, but she's being clever. She frames it as gathering memories for a family scrapbook and just happens to pay people for their time. The amounts are small enough to avoid obvious bribery charges." That afternoon, I discovered how far she'd taken this memory mining. My college roommate, Hannah, called voice shaking with anger. "Alondra, your mom just left my apartment. She offered me $500 to say you had mood swings and paranoid episodes in college. When I refused, she got nasty. Said I clearly never really cared about you if I wouldn't help your family save you. I'm so sorry she dragged you into this, Hannah." "Don't apologize. But you should know she recorded our conversation. When I kicked her out, she said she had enough footage to prove your friends are enablers who ignored your mental health issues." More calls came in throughout the day. Friends, acquaintances, even my high school prom date reported similar visits. My mother had transformed into an investigative journalist, hunting for any scrap of information to support her fabricated narrative. But the masterstroke came that evening. I was reviewing security protocols with Morrison Tech's team when my personal email chimed. The sender made my heart stop. Memorial Hospital Psychiatric Ward. The email contained intake paperwork for involuntary commitment, partially filled out with my information. The requesting party, Linda Sinclair, concerned mother. The listed symptoms, paranoid delusions, violent tendencies, complete break from reality. Attached was a video file labeled Evidence of Deterioration. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The footage was from my apartment, from Ethan's illegal cameras. It showed me crying after particularly difficult days, talking to myself while working through code problems, even a moment where I'd thrown a pillow in frustration after another family ambush. Edited together with ominous music, it painted a picture of someone in serious mental distress. "She's trying to have me committed," I said to the security chief, showing him the email. His face darkened. This crossed from harassment into attempted false imprisonment. We need to involve law enforcement immediately. But my mother had anticipated that. Within an hour, her social media exploded with new posts. "We've made the hardest decision of our lives, seeking professional help for our daughter who's clearly suffering. The corporate lawyers are trying to block us from getting her treatment. They'd rather profit from her labor than see her healthy. Please pray for us as we fight to save our baby girl." The comment section filled with outrage at Morrison Tech for preventing a loving mother from helping her sick child. People who'd never met me called for boycotts, protests, legal action against the company keeping me from treatment. Then came the interviews. My mother appeared on 3 local morning shows, each time refining her performance. She dressed carefully, not too polished, just worn enough to seem authentically distraught. She brought props, my childhood photos, handwritten letters I'd sent from summer camp, the Mother's Day cards I'd made in elementary school. "I don't want her money," she told one sympathetic host. "I want my daughter back, the bright, loving girl who used to help at the hardware store every summer. Not this stranger who sends FBI agents after her own father and has her brother arrested on false charges." She revealed selective truths twisted into lies. Yes, the FBI had interviewed my father because he'd committed crimes. Yes, Ethan had been arrested for breaking and entering and illegal surveillance. But context didn't matter in the court of public opinion. My breaking point came when she posted a video from my grandmother's funeral. I hadn't known she'd recorded it, but there I was, crying over the casket, clearly distraught. Her caption read, "The last time I saw my real daughter, grief broke something in her that day. If only I'd recognized the signs sooner. Mental illness often manifests after loss. I failed her then. I won't fail her now." Using my grandmother's death, the woman whose inheritance they'd stolen, as a prop in their scheme was beyond cruel. It was sacrilege. I called Catherine. "I want to respond publicly." "Alondra, that's exactly what she wants. Engagement feeds her narrative." No silence feeds her narrative. Every unanswered accusation becomes truth in the public mind. After much debate, we crafted a single statement posted across Morrison Tech's corporate channels. "Ms. Alondra Sinclair is a valued member of our team who's been subjected to sustained harassment and criminal actions by family members seeking financial gain. Recent social media campaigns are part of documented extortion attempts currently under federal investigation. Morrison Tech supports our employees' right to safety and autonomy. We encourage anyone experiencing similar family financial abuse to seek help through appropriate channels." Attached were resources for financial abuse victims and statistics showing how common such situations were. We didn't attack my mother directly, didn't engage with her emotional manipulation, just facts support and a clear message that I wasn't alone. The response was immediate. My mother posted a tearful video claiming corporate intimidation, accusing Morrison Tech of turning her daughter against her. But something had shifted. Between her posts, other voices began emerging. Other women who'd experienced similar abuse. Other families torn apart by financial manipulation. The hashtag "financial abuse is real" began trending, competing with her Save Alondra campaign. That night, exhausted and emotionally drained, I found a package at my temporary housing. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Inside was every Mother's Day card I'd ever made, every school photo, every token of childhood affection I'd given her over the years. The note was brief. "Since you've abandoned your family, we no longer need these reminders of the daughter we lost." I sat among the scattered memories, evidence of a relationship that had maybe never been what I thought. Each card professing love to someone who saw me as an investment. Each photo capturing a child who didn't yet know her value would be measured in dollars. But I wasn't that child anymore. And while my mother could weaponize our past, she couldn't control my future. The war for public opinion would rage on, but I'd found something more powerful than her emotional manipulation, truth support, and the strength to withstand whatever came next. Tomorrow would bring new attacks, new performances, new attempts to break me. But tonight I carefully packed away the childhood memories, not in surrender, but in farewell. The daughter she was mourning had never really existed. The real me, the one who refused to be bought, sold, or emotionally blackmailed, was just beginning to live. The courthouse steps were slick with morning rain as I arrived with Catherine and the Morrison Tech legal team. After months of documentation, evidence gathering, and strategic planning, we were finally taking offensive action. Today we filed comprehensive charges against my entire family: fraud identity, theft, harassment, extortion, and attempted corporate espionage. But my family had beaten us there. Alondra. My mother's voice carried across the plaza. She stood with a group of supporters, all holding signs: "Corporate greed destroys families. Mental health before profits. Justice for the Sinclairs." Local news cameras were already rolling as she rushed toward me, arms outstretched. Morrison Tech security intercepted her, but not before she cried out, "My baby! Please just let me hug my daughter!" The optics were devastating. A mother kept from embracing her child by corporate muscle. Catherine guided me quickly inside, but damage was done. The evening news would lead with that image. Inside the courthouse, we discovered the full scope of their counteroffensive. My family hadn't just prepared a defense, they'd launched their own legal attack. The documents were staggering elder abuse charges against me, claiming I'd abandoned my aging parents in their time of need. Defamation suits for my false allegations. Most disturbing, a competency hearing petition seeking to have me declared mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. "They're throwing everything at the wall," Catherine muttered, scanning through filings. "Half of these are frivolous, but they'll bog us down in proceedings for months." Their lawyer emerged from a side chamber, Richard Brennan's younger brother Carl, a man with a reputation for taking cases other attorneys wouldn't touch. He approached with a shark smile. "Ms. Hartley, my clients are prepared to drop all charges in exchange for a simple family reconciliation. No admission of wrongdoing needed. Just a daughter returning to her loving family." "Your clients are facing federal charges," Catherine replied coolly. "This isn't a family dispute anymore. Federal charges based on the confused accusations of a young woman clearly suffering from work-induced psychological distress. My clients have extensive documentation of concerning behavior." He produced a thick folder. I glimpsed the contents. Screenshots from Ethan's illegal surveillance creatively edited. Photos from family gatherings where I looked tired or upset, now reframed as evidence of mental decline. Even medical records. How had they gotten those? "Interesting how your clients obtained video from illegally installed cameras," Catherine observed. "Cameras your client Ethan was arrested for installing." Carl's smile never wavered. "Ethan was released without charges. Misunderstanding about a brother's concern for his sister's safety. As for these medical records, Alondra listed her parents as emergency contacts. They had every right to request them when concerned about her welfare." The violation was breathtaking. They'd accessed my medical history, twisting routine checkups into evidence of instability. A prescription for anxiety medication during finals week became proof of psychological issues. A mention of work stress turned into documented mental collapse. The initial hearing was a circus. Judge Patricia Chen, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, looked increasingly frustrated as both sides presented opening arguments. My family's supporters packed the gallery, occasionally making sympathetic noises until threatened with removal. Carl Brennan painted a picture of a close-knit family destroyed by corporate manipulation. Morrison Tech identified a vulnerable young woman, isolated her from her support system, and convinced her that normal family financial arrangements were somehow sinister. They've weaponized her temporary confusion for their own agenda. Catherine's response was surgical. She presented evidence, methodically forged loan documents with my signature bank records showing systematic theft from my inheritance recordings of threats and harassment. The FBI's preliminary findings on the corporate espionage attempt were particularly damning. But for every piece of evidence, Carl had a reinterpretation. The loans misunderstandings about family financial support, the inheritance withdrawal, managing funds for an unstable young woman, the corporate espionage, a desperate father trying to understand why his daughter had turned against him. Your Honor, Catherine said during one particularly heated exchange, the defense is asking this court to believe that forgery, identity theft, and federal crimes are normal family behavior. That's not just incorrect, it's dangerous. Judge Chen called a recess during which I escaped to a private room to avoid my family's supporters. Through the window, I could see my mother giving another impromptu press conference, tears, perfectly timed for cameras. The afternoon brought witness testimony. My family had assembled an impressive roster of family friends who testified about my sudden personality change, distant relatives who swore I'd always been troubled, even a therapist they'd somehow found who claimed I showed classic signs of work-induced paranoid disorder based solely on their descriptions. But we had witnesses too. Aunt Martha took the stand despite family pressure detailing the loan fraud she'd discovered. Mrs. Rodriguez testified about the break-in attempts at my apartment. Most powerfully, 3 other families came forward, victims of similar financial abuse who'd found courage in my public stand. One woman, Teresa Chen, described how her family had drained her accounts while claiming she was mentally unstable. They used the exact same playbook, she testified. Isolation, gaslighting, public humiliation. If Alondra hadn't gone public, I'd still believe I was crazy for wanting to keep my own salary. The tide began to turn when Morrison Tech's security chief presented the surveillance footage. Video after video showed my father meeting with Jake, exchanging money and documents, Ethan breaking into my apartment, my mother attempting to bribe building staff. The evidence was overwhelming, but Carl Brennan had one more card to play. Your Honor, I'd like to call a surprise witness, someone whose testimony will shed new light on Ms. Sinclair's state of mind. The courtroom doors opened and my high school boyfriend, Marcus, walked in. I hadn't seen him in 7 years, hadn't thought about him in 5. Yet here he was, looking uncomfortable, but determined. On the stand, he revealed that my mother had tracked him down, offered him $10,000 to testify about our teenage relationship. She wanted me to say Alondra was unstable, jealous, violent. When I refused, she threatened to ruin my business with bad reviews and harassment. And yet you're here. Carl noted, clearly annoyed his witness had gone off script. Yeah, I'm here. To tell the truth, Alondra was the most level-headed person I knew. If she says her family is doing this stuff, I believe her. And the fact that her mom tried to bribe me proves it. The judge had heard enough. I'm issuing temporary restraining orders against all family members pending full hearings. The competency petition is dismissed as clearly retaliatory. As for the various financial crimes alleged, those will proceed to trial. But as we left the courthouse, my family's supporters surrounded us, shouting accusations. Phone cameras captured every second as my mother collapsed dramatically, wailing about justice denied. My father stood stoic, the wronged patriarch, while Ethan played the confused brother, just wanting his sister back. This isn't over, Carl Brennan promised as we pushed through the crowd. Public opinion matters more than legal rulings. Your client will crack under the pressure. That evening, safely in Morrison Tech's offices, I watched the news coverage. Despite our legal victory, the narrative remained split. Half saw me as a brave woman escaping family abuse. The other half bought my family's story of mental illness and corporate manipulation. "You did well today," Catherine assured me. "The truth is on our side." But truth felt fragile against the onslaught of emotional manipulation. My phone buzzed with notifications, former classmates choosing sides, extended family members disowning me, strangers, sending death threats or messages of support in equal measure. Sarah found me on the roof garden staring at the city lights. "Rough day." "I won in court, so why does it feel like I'm losing?" She sat beside me, choosing her words carefully. "Because they're fighting a different war. You're fighting for justice. They're fighting for control. Those aren't the same battlefield. How do I win both? Maybe you don't. Maybe you just survive until they exhaust themselves. Either way, you're not alone." As if to prove her point, my phone lit up with messages from the Morrison Tech team. Words of support, offers of help, reminders that I had a different kind of family now, one that didn't come with price tags or conditions. The legal war would continue for months. There would be more hearings, more evidence, more attempts to break me down. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer just defending myself. I was part of something larger, a community of survivors refusing to be silenced. My family had expected me to crumble under legal pressure. Instead, they'd created a symbol of resistance. Every person who'd ever been told they owed their earnings to family, everyone who'd been called selfish for wanting autonomy, everyone who'd been labeled mentally ill for saying no, they were all watching now. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I wasn't fighting it alone. The war room at Morrison Tech had transformed from a typical conference space into a command center. Multiple screens displayed real-time social media monitoring, legal document tracking, and security feeds. What had started as a family dispute had evolved into a case study in corporate crisis management, with my situation becoming a test of Morrison Tech's values. Marcus Morrison stood at the head of the table addressing the assembled team. "This has gone beyond protecting an employee. We're now facing a coordinated assault on our corporate integrity. They're trying to make us the villain in their narrative." The numbers were sobering. My family's campaign had generated 3 million social media impressions. The Save Alondra Fund had raised over $40,000. More concerning, Morrison Tech's client relations team reported nervous inquiries from major accounts. Pinnacle Industries is pushing hard, the head of sales reported. They're telling clients that we're unstable, that we manipulate employees, that working with us is a reputational risk. All while forgetting their own involvement in attempted corporate espionage. The legal counsel added dryly. Sarah, who'd become my unofficial guardian angel, raised a crucial point. "We need to shift from defense to offense, not against the family. That feeds their narrative. But we need to tell the real story." "What do you propose?" Marcus asked. "We go transparent, completely. Show the world what supporting employees actually looks like." Over the next 2 hours, they crafted a comprehensive response strategy, not just for my case, but a broader initiative on workplace protection from personal harassment. They would turn my family's attack into an opportunity to lead industry change. The next morning, Morrison Tech announced the Safe Harbor Initiative, a comprehensive program protecting employees from personal life intrusions affecting their work. It included enhanced security protocols, legal support funds, and partnerships with domestic abuse organizations. "We're not just protecting Alondra," Marcus explained at the press conference. "We're acknowledging that the line between personal and professional has blurred. When employees face harassment, stalking, or financial abuse, even from family, it becomes a workplace safety issue." The response was immediate and polarizing. Progressive companies praised the initiative. Conservative commentators accused Morrison Tech of destroying family values. But most importantly, employees from across the tech industry began sharing their own stories. The hashtag Dr. Safe Harbor stories exploded with testimonies. A programmer whose ex-husband had stalked her at 3 different companies, a designer whose parents had demanded his startup equity, an analyst whose siblings had harassed her for refusing to fund their lifestyles. My story had opened a floodgate. But my family wasn't backing down. They pivoted their narrative, now painting Morrison Tech as a cult that brainwashed employees against their families. Carl Brennan appeared on news shows claiming the Safe Harbor initiative was designed to isolate workers and increase corporate control. "They're creating corporate orphans," he declared on one program. "Young people cut off from their roots, dependent entirely on their employers. It's psychological manipulation disguised as protection." The battle escalated when hackers, suspiciously sophisticated ones, targeted Morrison Tech's systems. They didn't breach our defenses, but they tried repeatedly, focusing on accessing employee records and internal communications about my case. "This isn't amateur hour anymore," our cybersecurity chief reported. "Someone's funding professional attacks." The FBI investigation expanded, now examining whether my family had hired criminal hackers. The digital forensics revealed IP addresses traced to Eastern Europe payment trails, leading through cryptocurrency, all funded by mysterious transfers that coincidentally matched withdrawals from my parents' accounts. During this chaos, something beautiful happened. My colleagues didn't just support me professionally, they embraced me personally. Team lunches became family dinners. Code reviews included check-ins on my mental health. The gaming club stayed after hours when I needed distraction. David from development shared his own story over coffee. My family disowned me for marrying outside our religion. I know it's not the same, but I understand the grief. Mourning people who are still alive is its own special hell. Lisa from marketing had survived financial abuse from her ex-husband. The gaslighting is the worst part. They make you question your own reality until you don't trust your own judgment. Even Marcus opened up during a late evening when we both worked through dinner. My father wanted me to take over his construction company, called me a traitor for choosing tech. We didn't speak for 10 years, reconciled eventually, but only after I'd proven success on my own terms. These stories, these connections formed a protective web around me. When my mother posted another tearful video, my colleagues countered with testimonies about my character. When fake news about my mental breakdown circulated, they flooded social media with pictures of team celebrations, showing me thriving. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A whistleblower from Pinnacle Industries reached out to our legal team. They had recordings of executives discussing the Sinclair situation, specifically how to exploit it to damage Morrison Tech's reputation and poach clients. They saw an opportunity. The whistleblower explained in a secure call, "Your family's campaign aligned with their goals. They've been funding it indirectly, amplifying it through bot networks, even providing media training to your parents." The recordings were damning. Pinnacle executives laughing about useful idiots, discussing payment structures to keep the family motivated, strategizing how to maximize Morrison Tech's reputational damage while maintaining plausible deniability. Armed with this evidence, Morrison Tech's legal team struck back hard. They filed antitrust violations, corporate sabotage charges, and defamation suits that named not just Pinnacle, but specific executives. The FBI's white-collar crime division took over, recognizing this as organized corporate warfare. My family suddenly found their funding mysteriously drying up. The professional social media managers disappeared. The slick production values on their videos vanished. Without corporate backing, they were reduced to what they'd always been, desperate manipulators out of their depth. But Morrison Tech wasn't done. They organized an industry summit on employee protection, inviting companies worldwide to share best practices. They published white papers on recognizing and preventing workplace-related personal harassment. They turned my nightmare into a movement. At the summit, I was asked to speak. Standing before 500 industry leaders, I shared my story in full. Not just the harassment and theft, but the grief of losing the family I'd thought I had, the confusion of being gaslit, the fear that maybe they were right, maybe I was selfish for wanting autonomy. Financial abuse within families is more common than we admit, I told the audience. We need to stop treating it as a private matter when it affects workplace safety and employee well-being. No one should have to choose between their career and their family, but when family becomes abusive, employers must stand ready to protect their people. The standing ovation felt like vindication, but more importantly, it felt like change. Companies began implementing their own safe harbor policies. Support groups formed within major corporations. The conversation shifted from individual drama to systemic solutions. That evening, Morrison Tech threw an impromptu celebration, not for winning, the legal battles continued, but for standing together. Marcus raised a toast. To Alondra, who showed us that protecting employees isn't just about physical safety or fair wages. It's about recognizing their full humanity and supporting them through whatever life throws their way. As I looked around the room at faces that had become family in the truest sense, I realized something profound. My biological family had tried to break me by making me choose between them and my future. Instead, they'd helped me find a different kind of family, one bound by respect, support, and genuine care, rather than manipulation and obligation. The war wasn't over. Criminal trials loomed. My family continued their campaigns, though, with diminishing returns. Pinnacle faced federal investigation, but surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide, I felt stronger than ever. Morrison Tech had given me more than a job. They'd given me a model for what family could be. Protective without being possessive, supportive without being transactional, loving without conditions. They'd shown me that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, celebrating with people who'd fought for me simply because it was right, I finally understood what home really meant. It wasn't a blood connection or a childhood house. It was where people saw your worth beyond your wallet and stood beside you when the world tried to tear you down. The family I'd lost had seen me as an investment. The family I'd found saw me as invaluable. That made all the difference. The knock on my apartment door came at 6 a.m, gentle but persistent. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Rodriguez, my former building manager, holding a manila envelope and looking nervously down the hallway. "Alondra Mia, I need to speak with you. It's important." I opened the door quickly, ushering her inside. She'd been forced to evict me months ago due to the chaos my family created, but she'd done it with tears in her eyes and profuse apologies. "I'm sorry to come so early," she said, clutching the envelope, "but I couldn't wait any longer. My conscience, it's been eating at me." "What's wrong?" She handed me the envelope with trembling hands. "I've been documenting everything. For 3 years, I've been recording, taking pictures, saving evidence. Your family, they've done this before." My legs felt weak as I opened the envelope. Inside were USB drives, printed screenshots, and photographs dating back years. Security footage, timestamps, audio files, even handwritten logs in Mrs. Rodriguez's careful script. "Sit down," she urged, guiding me to the couch. "Let me explain." She pulled out a photograph, a young woman I didn't recognize standing in what looked like my old apartment building's lobby, surrounded by security guards and police. "This is Carmen Silva. 10 years ago, she lived in Unit 4B. Beautiful girl, worked at a tech startup downtown. Her parents did the exact same thing to her." My hands shook as I studied the photo. The woman looked exhausted, defeated, her eyes holding a familiar, hollow expression I'd seen in my own mirror. "Your parents were behind that," I whispered. "No, her own parents. But your parents." Mrs. Rodriguez pulled out another document. "They consulted with them, taught them the playbook. Your father ran seminars at the community center, understanding your rights as parents of adult children. He taught other families how to do what they're doing to you." The room spun as she laid out document after document. sign-in sheets from these seminars with dozens of names, email printouts where my father offered his services to help parents access their children's earnings, even a price list. $500 for a consultation, $2,000 for a complete strategic plan. Carmen broke. Mrs. Rodriguez continued sadly. After months of harassment, public humiliation, and legal battles, she signed everything over to her parents, gave them control of her finances, moved back home, quit her job. Last I heard, she works part-time at a grocery store and hands over every penny. And my parents facilitated this. They've built a network, Alondra. Parents who believe their children owe them everything. They share tactics, legal strategies, emotional manipulation techniques. Your father is like their guru. She showed me a private Facebook group, Parents' Rights Alliance, with over 300 members. The posts were chilling. Parents sharing their children's personal information, discussing how to break their will, celebrating when a child finally came home. One post from my father dated 2 years ago made me physically ill. Remember, the key is patience and escalation. Start with guilt, move to public pressure, then legal action. Most break by stage 2, but for the stubborn ones, you need to attack their reputation, their relationships, their sense of reality. They'll thank you when they're back under your protection. I need to call my lawyer, I said, reaching for my phone. There's more. Mrs. Rodriguez stopped me. The security footage I saved, it's not just your family trying to break into your apartment. It's other parents from their group helping each other. They take turns, provide alibis, share resources. She pulled up video files on her tablet, multiple instances of strangers attempting to access not just my apartment, but others in the building. Parents working in coordinated teams, testing security, documenting weaknesses. Why didn't you report this before? Tears filled her eyes. Because I was scared. Some of these parents are powerful people, lawyers, business owners, even a judge. But when I saw what they were doing to you, how far they were willing to go, I couldn't stay silent anymore. The evidence was staggering. My family hadn't just targeted me, they'd commercialized parental abuse, turned it into a cottage industry. The Save Alondra campaign was just the latest iteration of a well-tested formula. There's one more thing, Mrs. Rodriguez said, pulling out a final USB drive. This is audio from a meeting last month. Your parents don't know I recorded it. They came to ask me to testify against you, and they said things you need to hear. I plugged the drive into my laptop, and my parents' voices filled the room. The recording quality was crystal clear. Mrs. Rodriguez had hidden a professional grade device. My father's voice. The thing about Alondra is she actually believes she earned that job on merit. She doesn't understand that everything she has is because of what we invested in her. The tutoring, the school supplies the roof over her head. That created her success. We're just collecting on our investment. My mother's laugh, cold and unfamiliar. 23 years of expenses. Do you know how much raising a child costs? And she thinks a few thousand in rent and ramen means she's independent. Please, we own her success. We built it. The other one, Ethan, he's smarter, my father continued. He plays along, understands the game. But Alondra always had this stubborn streak. Thought she was special. That's why we need to break her publicly, as an example to other ungrateful children. The recording continued for 40 minutes. They discussed strategies, shared stories of other families they'd helped, laughed about the mental illness angle being particularly effective. They treated their children like business assets, their love purely transactional. But the most damning part came near the end when Mrs. Rodriguez asked about their endgame. Once she signs over control, my mother explained, we'll let her keep working, maybe even let her think she has some autonomy. But every major decision, every financial move will go through us. It's for her own good. Children never really grow up. They need guidance. And if she doesn't break? Mrs. Rodriguez had asked. Everyone breaks eventually, my father said confidently. If the current pressure isn't enough, we escalate. We have her medical records, her therapy notes from college, even some creative interpretations of her behavior. Worst case, we have friends at Riverside Psychiatric. A 72-hour hold can work wonders for attitude adjustment. They were planning to have me involuntarily committed if I didn't surrender, and they had the connections to do it. I sat in stunned silence after the recording ended. Mrs. Rodriguez squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, mija. No child should hear their parents speak about them like that, but you needed to know what you're really fighting. You risked a lot bringing me this." She straightened her shoulders. My own daughter went through something similar with her in-laws. I couldn't help her in time. She lost custody of her children when they painted her as unstable. I won't watch it happen again. I spent the next 3 hours copying everything, creating backups, organizing evidence. This wasn't just about my case anymore. This was about dozens of families across the city, maybe hundreds being systematically abused by parents who'd turned exploitation into a science. Catherine arrived within an hour of my call, along with 2 FBI agents who'd been assigned to the expanding case. Their expressions grew increasingly grim as they reviewed the evidence. "This changes everything," Agent Chen said. "This isn't just family financial abuse. This is organized crime, conspiracy, racketeering, potentially human trafficking, given the coercion elements. We need to move fast," Catherine added. "If they know Mrs. Rodriguez has turned evidence, she could be in danger." Protective custody was arranged for Mrs. Rodriguez, who hugged me tightly before leaving with the agents. "You're brave, mija. Braver than Carmen, braver than all the others who gave in. Don't let them break you." That afternoon, the FBI executed search warrants across the city. The Parents' Rights Alliance members woke to federal agents at their doors, computers seized, documents confiscated. The network my parents had so carefully built began crumbling in hours. The news broke by evening. FBI uncovers parent extortion ring dominated headlines. The story was bigger than anyone had imagined. Families across 3 states were involved, sharing tactics through encrypted channels, coordinating attacks on their adult children. My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanting statements, other victims reaching out for support, even some parents from the group calling to threaten me for destroying their support network. But the call that stopped me cold came from an unknown number. When I answered, Carmen Silva's voice whispered across the line. "Is it true? Are they really arresting them?" "Yes, the FBI has everything. Carmen, you can speak up now. You can be free." She was crying so hard she could barely speak. 10 years. For 10 years, I've been their prisoner. I thought I was alone, thought I was crazy for wanting my own life. "You're not alone. You never were. And now we can fight back together." As the evening progressed, Morrison Tech's legal team worked with federal prosecutors to understand the full scope of the conspiracy. The evidence Mrs. Rodriguez provided revealed connections to similar groups in other cities, a whole underground movement of parents who believed their children existed to fund their lifestyles. Sarah sat with me as we watched the news coverage, her arm around my shoulders. "You did this," she said softly. "Your refusal to give in exposed an entire criminal network." I just said no to giving away my salary. I never imagined. That's how abuse works. It hides in plain sight, disguised as tradition or family values. You pulled back the curtain. The war with my family had suddenly become something much larger. Federal RICO charges were being prepared. Assets were being frozen. The Parents' Rights Alliance members were turning on each other, trying to cut deals. And somewhere in the city, Carmen Silva was packing her bags, preparing to reclaim the life that had been stolen from her a decade ago. She wouldn't be the only one. Across the state, adult children were watching the news, with hope, realizing their situations weren't unique, weren't their fault, and most importantly, weren't inescapable. My family had tried to break me using techniques they'd perfected on others. Instead, they'd created their own downfall. The evidence Mrs. Rodriguez courageously provided wouldn't just save me, it would save dozens of others trapped in similar nightmares. The building manager who'd been forced to evict me had become the hero who brought down a criminal empire. Sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places, carried by people brave enough to say, "No more." Tomorrow would bring arrests, trials, and the slow process of justice. But tonight, victims were becoming survivors, and a network built on exploitation was crumbling into dust, all because one building manager kept careful records and found the courage to share them. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had fundamentally changed. We weren't fighting alone anymore. The federal courthouse holding facility wasn't where I'd ever imagined meeting my brother again. Ethan sat across from me in the sterile interview room, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the preppy clothes he'd always favored. His arrest as part of the Parents' Rights Alliance sweep had shocked everyone. He was supposed to be the golden child, the one who played along. "You look tired," he said, attempting a weak smile. "You look incarcerated," I replied flatly. He flinched. Fair enough. FBI agent Chen sat beside me, recording device prominently displayed. Ethan's court-appointed lawyer, a harried-looking woman named Ms. Vasquez, sat nervously beside him. The federal prosecutor had offered him a deal: full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. This meeting would determine if he took it. Before we begin, Agent Chen said, "Mr. Sinclair needs to understand that everything said here can and will be used in the ongoing investigation. Any lies or omissions will result in prosecution to the fullest extent of the law." "I understand," Ethan said quietly. "I'm ready to tell the truth. All of it." "Start from the beginning," I said. "When did you know what they were planning?" He took a shaky breath. "I was 16. You were in your senior year of high school working 3 jobs to save for college. Mom and Dad sat me down for what they called the family business talk." Family business? That's what they called their system. They showed me spreadsheets, Alondra, detailed calculations of every cent they'd spent raising us. Food, clothes, shelter, even the cost of driving us to school. Your column was already over $200,000. My stomach churned. They'd been calculating our debt to them since we were children. "They explained that children are investments," he continued, "that successful parents create successful children, then collect returns on those investments. They said it was natural, traditional, how families had always worked." "And you believed them?" His face crumpled. "I was 16, and they were my parents. They made it sound so logical. They showed me other families doing the same thing, introduced me to other kids who'd accepted the arrangement. Made it seem normal." Agent Chen leaned forward. "Tell us about the Parents' Rights Alliance." "Dad was one of the founders," Ethan said. "He and 4 other fathers started it about 12 years ago. They'd meet at our house when you were at school, Alondra. I'd serve coffee and listen to them strategize." "Strategize what?" "How to maintain control over their adult children. They shared techniques: emotional manipulation, financial pressure, legal tactics. They had a whole curriculum. Dad was particularly proud of his mental health angle. He said questioning someone's sanity was the fastest way to discredit them. I felt sick remembering all the times they'd suggested I was unstable, needed help, wasn't thinking clearly. It had never been concern. It was a calculated tactic. "Tell me about the medical school lie," I demanded. Ethan couldn't meet my eyes. "I never applied to medical school, never even took the MCAT. The acceptance letter was fake, created by a guy Dad knew who specialized in document forgery. The whole thing was designed to guilt you into paying. But you played along, helped them." "I didn't want to..." The words exploded out of him. "Do you understand what it was like being the spare child? You were the investment. Smart-driven, destined for success. I was the backup plan kept dependent in case you escaped." "So you helped them try to destroy me." "I helped them because I was terrified of becoming their primary target. When you refused to pay, they turned on me. Suddenly, I needed to get a job, contribute to the household sign over my future earnings. Everything they'd planned for you shifted to me." Ms. Vasquez touched his arm, warning him to be careful, but Ethan shrugged her off. "I recorded everything," he said, looking directly at me. "For 3 years, I've been documenting their operations. Audio files, video recordings, copies of their communications with other parents. I thought maybe someday I'd find the courage to expose them. The flash drive you gave me was real but incomplete. I held back the worst stuff because I was still scared. But when they had me install those cameras in your apartment, when I saw how far they were willing to go, his voice broke. I realized they'd never stop. They'd destroy you completely, then turn on me, then probably have more kids to exploit. Agent Chen produced a laptop. We found encrypted files on your devices. Are you willing to provide the passwords? Ethan nodded, providing a complex string of characters. The screen filled with folders, thousands of files meticulously organized by date and incident. Jesus, Agent Chen breathed as she scrolled through. This is comprehensive. 3 years of evidence. Ethan confirmed. Every Parents' Rights Alliance meeting I could record, every strategy session, every family they targeted. I opened a video file at random. It showed my parents in our living room with 3 other couples explaining their breakthrough strategy for dealing with stubborn children. The key is to make them doubt their own perceptions, my father said in the video. Gaslight them consistently. Tell them they're remembering things wrong, that conversations didn't happen the way they think. Eventually, they stop trusting their own judgment. Another file contained spreadsheets tracking the success rates of different tactics. 60% of targeted children eventually surrendered financial control. Another 20% maintained minimal contact while providing monetary support. Only 20% successfully escaped, and those were marked for advanced intervention. Show her the Riverside file, Ethan said quietly. Agent Chen navigated to a folder labeled Riverside Psychiatric. Inside were email exchanges between my father and a Dr. Michael Harrison discussing rates for involuntary holds and the documentation needed to commit an adult child for evaluation. They had a whole pipeline, Ethan explained. Parents would claim their child was unstable. Dr. Harrison would do a rushed evaluation and recommend a hold, and during those 72 hours, the parents would gain emergency conservatorship. How many? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. At least 40 over the past 5 years. Most were released after signing financial control over to their parents. A few fought back but lost credibility after being institutionalized. 3 are still under conservatorship. The horror of it was overwhelming. An entire system designed to break adult children to steal their autonomy and earnings, operating in plain sight under the guise of parental concern. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Agent Chen asked. Because I was a coward, Ethan said simply. Because they'd raised me to be dependent, to fear the outside world, to believe I couldn't survive without them. It wasn't until Alondra fought back and survived that I realized escape was possible. He turned to me, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. For everything. For the cameras, for playing along, for not warning you sooner. I was so scared of becoming you that I helped them try to destroy you. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was. But looking at my brother, really looking at him for the first time in years, I saw another victim. He'd been groomed from childhood to be their enforcer, kept dependent and afraid, a prisoner in a golden cage. What happened when they were arrested? I asked. They called me from jail, demanding I bail them out. When I said I couldn't access their accounts, they turned on me instantly. 22 years of being their good son. And they called me a worthless failure, a disappointment, said I was just like you. Just like me. He smiled through his tears, strong enough to say no. It was meant as an insult, but it was the best compliment they'd ever given me. The next 2 hours were spent reviewing evidence. Ethan provided passwords to encrypted communications, explained coded language in documents, identified key players in the network. The Parents' Rights Alliance was larger than even the FBI had realized, with chapters in 6 states and connections to similar organizations internationally. They were planning a conference, Ethan revealed, a 3-day event where parents could learn advanced techniques for controlling their adult children. Dad was going to be the keynote speaker. Instead of speaking at a conference, our parents would be speaking at their trials. The network they'd built to exploit their children would be used as evidence against them. Every strategy they'd shared, every victim they'd created, would contribute to their downfall. As the interview concluded, Ethan looked at me one last time. I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that testifying against them, helping destroy their network, it's the first thing I've ever done that feels right. What will you do when you get out? I asked. Honestly, I have no idea. I've never made a decision without their input, never chosen my own path. But maybe that's okay. Maybe starting at zero is better than living their lie. I stood to leave, then paused at the door. Ethan, you were right about one thing. I am strong enough to say no, but so are you. You just proved it. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at his participation in my abuse, pity for the childhood that had groomed him to enable it, hope that he might find his own path to freedom. But more than anything, I felt validation. Every gaslighting attempt, every suggestion that I was crazy or ungrateful, it had all been calculated manipulation. The evidence Ethan provided proved that my perceptions were accurate. My resistance justified my fight necessary. The Parents' Rights Alliance thought they'd perfected a system for exploiting their children. They documented their tactics, shared their strategies, celebrated their victories. In their arrogance, they'd created the evidence that would destroy them. And in trying to make Ethan their accomplice, they'd created their most damaging witness. The son groomed to be their enforcer had become the key to their downfall. Sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected sources. The courthouse steps were packed with reporters, cameras, and protesters. What had started as my family's smear campaign against me had exploded into a national scandal. The Parents' Rights Alliance bust had exposed similar groups across the country, and suddenly financial abuse by parents was the topic dominating news cycles. I stood behind a podium flanked by Catherine Agent Chen and Marcus Morrison. Behind us, 30 other survivors of parental financial abuse waited to share their stories. We'd coordinated this press conference to happen simultaneously with the unsealing of federal indictments against over 200 parents involved in the nationwide conspiracy. Good morning. I began my voice steady despite the ocean of faces before me. 6 months ago, I was just a young woman who refused to give my entire salary to my parents. Today, we stand here to expose a systematic criminal enterprise that has trapped hundreds of adult children in financial servitude. The crowd erupted with questions, but I continued with my prepared statement. The Parents' Rights Alliance marketed itself as a support group for parents of ungrateful children. In reality, it was a criminal organization teaching emotional manipulation, financial coercion, and psychological abuse. They turned love into leverage and family into a business model. I clicked a remote and screens behind me displayed evidence, screenshots from the private forum's training materials titled Breaking Stubborn Children, price lists for services ranging from guilt consultation to full extraction planning. My father, Robert Sinclair, was one of the architects of this system. He taught other parents how to gaslight their children, how to weaponize mental health stigma, how to destroy careers and relationships until their children surrendered financial control. The next slide showed statistics compiled from Ethan's evidence. Over the past decade, the Alliance successfully extracted over $43 million from their adult children. They drove 17 people to bankruptcy, destroyed 28 careers, and facilitated the involuntary psychiatric commitment of 42 individuals who refused to comply. Gasps rippled through the crowd. These weren't just family squabbles. These were crimes with real victims and devastating consequences. Carmen Silva stepped forward, next, her voice trembling but determined. I was one of the first victims. 10 years ago, my parents used tactics they learned from Robert Sinclair to destroy my life. I lost my job, my friends, my savings, and ultimately my freedom. I spent a decade believing I was selfish for wanting to keep my own paycheck. One by one, survivors shared their stories. A software engineer whose parents had him committed for refusing to pay for his sister's wedding. A doctor whose family published revenge porn when she wouldn't sign over her practice. A teacher whose parents sued her for emotional damages when she moved out of state. Each story followed the same pattern. Love twisted into manipulation, independence punished as betrayal, success treated as theft from the family who created it. Then came the most powerful moment. Agent Chen took the podium to announce the charges. The FBI has unsealed indictments charging members of the Parents' Rights Alliance with racketeering conspiracy to commit fraud extortion, cyberstalking, and in several cases, kidnapping and false imprisonment. We've frozen approximately $12 million in assets obtained through these criminal activities. She continued, "We've also arrested 3 psychiatrists, 2 judges, and 5 attorneys who accepted bribes to facilitate involuntary commitments and conservatorships. This corruption reached the highest levels of our family court system." The crowd exploded with questions. One reporter shouted above the rest, "Ms. Sinclair, your parents claim they're victims of corporate manipulation. How do you respond?" I took a breath. Morrison Tech didn't manipulate me. They protected me. When my family tried to destroy my career, my employer stood by me. They recognized that workplace safety includes protection from personal harassment. Every company should follow their example. Another reporter, "What about forgiveness? These are still your parents." "Forgiveness isn't mandatory for survival," I replied. "My parents made calculated decisions to harm me for financial gain. They taught others to do the same. That's not a mistake requiring forgiveness. It's a crime requiring justice." Marcus Morrison stepped forward. Morrison Tech is announcing $1 million fund to support victims of parental financial abuse. We're also sharing our safe harbor protocols freely with any company wanting to protect their employees. No one should have to choose between their career and their family. The press conference continued for another hour with survivors sharing stories and resources. But the real impact came in the following days as the story exploded across media platforms. Parental financial abuse became a trending topic. Celebrities shared their own stories of family exploitation. Financial advisors created guides for protecting assets from manipulative relatives. Therapists specialized in recovery from family financial abuse reported months-long waiting lists. My parents, watching from their separate jail cells awaiting trial, made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. They managed to get a jailhouse interview with a sympathetic blogger claiming they were victims of a woke conspiracy to destroy traditional families. But their words rang hollow against the mountain of evidence. Ethan's recordings played on news shows. My parents laughing about breaking their children, discussing manipulation tactics, like recipes counting future earnings like guaranteed income. The public tide had turned completely. What started as ungrateful daughter abandons family became criminal parents exploit children nationwide. Editorial boards called for legal reform. Legislators proposed bills strengthening financial abuse protections. Universities created courses on recognizing and preventing family financial manipulation. But the most meaningful responses came from individual victims finding their voices. My inbox flooded with thousands of messages. I thought I was alone. "Your story gave me courage to say no. I've been free for 3 days and it's terrifying and wonderful. My parents disowned me yesterday. Thank you for showing me that's not the worst thing that could happen." Support groups formed organically online and in person. The Now You're Free from Financial Abuse community grew to over 100,000 members in weeks. People shared resources, escape plans, and most importantly, validation that their desires for autonomy weren't selfish. The trials began 2 months later. My parents, facing decades in prison, tried every manipulation in their playbook. They appeared in court looking frail and confused. They cried about losing their children. They claimed mental health issues of their own. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury saw videos of them training other parents in manipulation. They heard recordings of them laughing about their children's pain. They reviewed financial documents showing systematic theft and fraud. The verdict came back guilty on all counts. As the judge read the sentences, 15 years for my father, 12 for my mother, I felt no joy, only relief. The network they'd built to exploit children was destroyed. The techniques they'd perfected were exposed. The fear they'd weaponized had lost its power. Outside the courthouse, hundreds of survivors had gathered, not to protest or celebrate, but to witness. As I emerged, they didn't cheer or applaud. Instead, they stood in silent solidarity. People who understood that winning freedom from family abuse was complicated, painful, and necessary. Carmen Silva stood at the front holding a sign that read simply, "We survived." That evening, Morrison Tech hosted a celebration, not of the verdicts, but of the change we'd sparked. Companies worldwide had implemented protection protocols. Laws were being rewritten. The conversation about family financial abuse had moved from shadows to spotlight. "You changed the world," Sarah told me as we watched the sun set from the office rooftop garden. "No," I corrected. "We revealed what was already there. The abuse was always happening. We just made it impossible to ignore." My phone buzzed with a message from Ethan, who was serving his reduced sentence in minimum security. "Watch the news, proud of you. When I get out, I want to help other victims. Maybe that can be my redemption." I typed back, "Redemption isn't given. It's earned through actions. Start planning how you'll help. The work is just beginning." As news vans packed up below and survivors slowly dispersed, I reflected on the journey from that first text demanding my salary to this moment of national reckoning. My family had tried to break me using techniques they'd perfected over years. Instead, their persecution had revealed their crimes to the world. They'd wanted me to fund their retirement. Instead, I'd funded their downfall and sparked a movement. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't compliance. It's refusing to enable abuse even when that abuse comes wrapped in the language of family obligation. The war was won, but battles would continue. Other parents would try similar tactics. Other children would struggle with guilt and manipulation. But now they had examples, resources, and most importantly, the knowledge that they weren't alone. My family had taught me that love came with price tags and conditions. The movement we'd built proved that real love, whether from chosen family supportive employers or fellow survivors, came with respect for autonomy and celebration of independence. That was a lesson worth sharing with the world. The safety deposit box had sat untouched in the bank vault for 3 years, waiting for someone to discover its contents. It was Catherine who found the trail, a small key among my grandmother's effects that the estate lawyers had overlooked, dismissed as probably belonging to a piece of luggage or forgotten lockbox. "Your grandmother listed you as the sole authorized person for box 1847, the bank manager explained as she led us through the vault. She paid for 10 years in advance with strict instructions that only Alondra Sinclair could access it. My hands shook as I inserted the key. Inside the narrow metal box were 3 items, a sealed envelope with my name in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting, a small leather journal, and a USB drive. "I'll give you privacy," the manager said, showing us to a private viewing room. Catherine sat beside me as I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. My grandmother's handwriting, careful and precise even in her final months, filled several pages. "My dearest Alondra, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true, and you've discovered what your parents really are. I pray I'm wrong that they found their conscience after I'm gone, but I know my son too well to harbor such false hope. I need you to understand that what they're doing to you isn't love, isn't tradition, isn't normal. It's abuse, plain and simple, dressed up in the language of family obligation. I know because I lived through it myself, and I've watched them perfect their tactics over years." I had to stop reading, overwhelmed by hearing her voice through her words. Catherine squeezed my shoulder in silent support. The letter continued. "Your grandfather and I weren't poor despite what Robert told you. We owned several properties, had substantial savings, and lived comfortably. but your father convinced us to sign papers giving him financial power of attorney for our protection. Within 2 years, he drained everything, leaving us dependent on Social Security while he built his business with our money. I started documenting everything when I realized what was happening. The journal contains records of every transaction, every manipulation, every lie. But I was too weak, too afraid of destroying the family to act on it. My greatest regret is not protecting you and Ethan from them sooner. The journal confirmed everything. Page after page of meticulous records showing how my parents had systematically stolen from their own parents while gaslighting them into believing they were being cared for. He's teaching others one entry read. Robert holds meetings with other parents showing them how to maintain family unity through financial interdependence. I heard him joking that children are the best investment because they come with emotional leverage built in. My heart breaks for the families he's destroying. But it was the next section of the letter that made me gasp. I've left you more than money, Alondra. The USB drive contains recordings I made over the years. Your parents didn't know I was tech-savvy enough to use recording devices, but a nice young man at the senior center taught me. I have hundreds of hours of evidence. Them discussing their plans, their contempt for their children, their schemes to extract money from you both. The most important recording is from December 2019. Your parents met with a Dr. Harrison to discuss having you committed if you ever refused to comply with their demands. They were planning this before you even graduated college. They saw your independence as a threat from the beginning. I plugged in the USB drive with shaking hands. File after file appeared. Audio recordings labeled by date, some with brief descriptions. I clicked on the December 2019 file. My father's voice filled the room. She's too smart for the usual guilt trips. We need a nuclear option if she refuses to cooperate after graduation. Dr. Harrison's oily voice responded, Involuntary commitment requires specific criteria. We'd need to establish a pattern of concerning behavior. We can create that, my mother said coldly. I've been keeping notes on every emotional moment, every stressed phone call. With the right framing, normal young adult struggles become symptoms of instability. The beautiful thing about questioning someone's sanity, Dr. Harrison continued, is that their protests just seem like further evidence of paranoia. Once they're in the system for even a few days, their credibility is permanently damaged. I felt sick listening to them plan my potential imprisonment like a business strategy. But my grandmother wasn't finished. Her letter continued. I've also included recordings of Robert training other parents. He ran a workshop called Protecting Your Investment, Maintaining Access to Adult Children's Resources. He charged $500 per attendee and taught psychological manipulation techniques that would make cult leaders proud. But here's what they don't know, my dear one. I changed my will without telling them. The inheritance they stole was only part of what I had. The rest went into a trust they couldn't touch, one that only activates when you need it most. By the time you read this, that trust should have matured to approximately $500,000. The trust lawyers at Hartley Brennan and Associates have all the documentation. Your parents will fight it, claim undue influence or mental incapacity, but I was very careful. I had 3 independent psychiatric evaluations, video recordings of my intent, and witnesses they can't buy or intimidate. I looked at Catherine in shock. She was already pulling out her phone to contact her partners at the firm. The letter's final page was the most emotional. I failed you by not standing up to them sooner. I let fear of family conflict override my duty to protect you and Ethan. But I'm trying to make it right now, from beyond the grave where they can't manipulate or threaten me anymore. Use this evidence to protect yourself and others. Your father has hurt so many families with his teachings. The journal contains names, dates, and contact information for other victims who might be willing to speak up now. Remember that you owe them nothing. Not money, not time, not forgiveness. The fact that they created you doesn't give them ownership over your life or achievements. Real parents celebrate their children's independence, not scheme to destroy it. I love you truly and unconditionally. I'm proud of the strong, independent woman you've become, despite their best efforts to break you. Stand tall, fight hard, and know that at least one person in your family loved you for who you are, not what you could provide. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. P.S. Check the bottom of the safety deposit box. There's one more thing they don't know about. I reached into the box and found a small velvet pouch. Inside was my grandmother's engagement ring, a stunning Art Deco piece with a central sapphire surrounded by diamonds. She told them she lost it, I whispered, remembering my mother's fury over the missing heirloom. Catherine had finished her call. The trust exists. It's actually worth closer to $600,000 now with interest. Your parents tried to access it multiple times but were blocked. There's also a letter from your grandmother specifically stating that if your parents contest the trust, they're to receive nothing from her estate, not even sentimental items. We spent the next 3 hours reviewing the USB contents. The recordings were damning beyond belief. My grandmother had captured years of my parents' schemes, their training sessions, their casual cruelty toward their own children. One recording stood out, a conversation between my parents after I'd won a full scholarship to college. "This is a disaster," my mother said. "If she doesn't need us for tuition, how do we maintain control?" "We pivot," my father replied. "Create other dependencies. Emotional manipulation, social pressure, maybe even create some crises she'll need our help with. The scholarship just means we need to be more creative." They'd seen my success as a threat from the very beginning. Every achievement that made me more independent was something to be undermined or co-opted. The most powerful recording was one of my grandmother herself made just weeks before her death. "This is Eleanor Sinclair being of sound mind and body despite what my son might claim. I'm recording this to ensure there's no confusion about my intentions. I leave my granddaughter, Alondra, not just money, but evidence of her parents' crimes. I pray she uses it to free herself and others from their exploitation. To Robert and Linda, I know you'll watch this eventually. You were given everything, love, support, opportunities. You chose to become predators, feeding off your own children. That's not my failure as a parent. That's your failure as human beings. May God have mercy on your souls because your victims won't." Agent Chen was immediately interested in the recordings. They provided crucial corroboration for existing evidence and revealed additional victims who hadn't yet come forward. "Your grandmother built a bulletproof case," she said after reviewing everything. "It's like she knew someday this would all come to light." The trust money would be released within weeks, but more importantly, the evidence would ensure my parents could never hurt anyone again. The additional recordings would add years to their sentences and implicate other Parents' Rights Alliance members who'd escaped the initial sweep. That evening, I sat in my apartment holding my grandmother's ring up to the light. She'd loved me enough to protect me from beyond the grave, to gather evidence when I was too young to understand the danger, to ensure I had both the proof and the resources to fight back. Her letter had called it her greatest regret not acting sooner, but her careful documentation, her strategic planning, her final acts of defiance. They'd saved not just me, but dozens of other victims whose parents had learned exploitation techniques from mine. I slipped the ring onto my finger, a tangible reminder that I'd been truly loved by at least one family member. My grandmother had seen through the facade, documented the truth, and ensured justice would eventually prevail. The war with my parents was ending, but Eleanor Sinclair had provided the ammunition for victory from the very beginning. Some legacies are measured in money. Hers was measured in freedom. Mine and that of every person her evidence would help liberate from family financial abuse. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered to the empty room. "I promise to use everything you left me to help others escape too. Your love will ripple outward, freeing people you never met from chains you understood all too well." Her greatest gift wasn't the money or even the evidence. It was the proof that someone in my family had loved me unconditionally, had seen my worth beyond monetary value, and had fought to protect me in the way she knew best, through meticulous documentation and strategic planning. That was the inheritance that mattered most, The courtroom was packed for the final day of my parents' trial. 6 months of testimony, evidence presentation, and legal arguments had led to this moment. I sat in the front row between Catherine and Sarah, my grandmother's ring catching the light as I clasped my hands tightly together. My parents looked different now. The confident manipulators who'd terrorized me for months had been replaced by hollow-eyed defendants who'd finally realized their empire of exploitation was crashing down. My father's hair had gone completely gray. My mother had lost weight, her designer clothes replaced with simple courtroom attire. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Chen," the bailiff announced. Judge Chen took her seat, her expression grave. "Before we proceed to verdict, I've been informed that both defendants wish to make statements. This is highly unusual at this stage, but I'll allow it. Mr. Sinclair, you may approach." My father stood slowly, his attorney whispering urgently in his ear. He ignored the advice and walked to the podium. "Your Honor, members of the jury, I need to say something." His voice cracked, lacking the commanding tone I'd known all my life. "For 6 months I've sat here listening to evidence of things I did, words I said, plans I made. And for 6 months I've told myself it was all justified that I was protecting family values." He turned to look at me directly for the first time since the trial began. "Alondra, I convinced myself you owed us everything because we raised you. I turned love into a transaction, family into a business. I taught others to do the same, spreading poison and calling it tradition." The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of reporters' pens. But sitting here hearing recording after recording of myself, discussing my children like investments, hearing testimonies from families I helped destroy, I can't pretend anymore. I wasn't protecting family values. I was destroying families, including my own. His attorney looked ready to physically pull him back, but Judge Chen motioned for him to continue. "I built the Parents' Rights Alliance because I believed children existed to serve their parents' needs. I taught manipulation techniques like I was proud of them. I plotted to have my own daughter institutionalized if she didn't comply with financial demands. What kind of father does that? What kind of person?" Tears were streaming down his face now. "I thought I was entitled to my children's success because I'd paid for their childhood. But you don't get credit for doing the bare minimum as a parent. You don't get to claim ownership over another person's achievements just because you fulfilled legal obligations to feed and shelter them." He gripped the podium harder. "The prosecution is right. I'm guilty. Not just legally, but morally. I turned parental love into a weapon and I taught others to do the same. I destroyed my relationship with my children for money I didn't even need. I had a successful business, a comfortable life, but I wanted more and I was willing to sacrifice my kids to get it." My mother made a sound of protest, but he continued. "Linda and I had 2 bright, capable children who loved us, and we repaid that love by trying to enslave them financially. We stole Alondra's inheritance from her grandmother, a woman who saw through us and tried to protect her. We groomed Ethan to be our enforcer, keeping him dependent and afraid. We called it love, but it was abuse." He looked back at Judge Chen. "Your Honor, I'm not asking for mercy. I'm stating for the record that I'm guilty of all charges. More than that, I'm guilty of crimes that go beyond legal statutes. I'm guilty of betraying the sacred trust between parent and child. Whatever sentence you impose, it won't be enough to undo the damage I've caused." He walked back to his seat, his attorney looking stunned. My mother stood next, shaking with what I initially took for fear but quickly recognized as rage. "I don't share my husband's newfound guilt," she spat, glaring at him before turning to the court. "Everything we did was for our children's own good. This society has poisoned young people into thinking they don't owe their parents anything. We fed them, clothed them, educated them, and they think they can just walk away." "Mrs. Sinclair," Judge Chen warned, "I'd advise you to consider your words carefully." "Oh, I've considered them. For months, I've sat here being painted as a villain for wanting my children to show gratitude. Alondra makes $75,000 a year because of the foundation we provided. Without us, she'd be nothing, and she repays us by sending the FBI after us." She turned to me, her face twisted with fury. "You destroyed our lives over money. Money we're facing prison because you couldn't share your success with the people who made it possible." "That's enough," Judge Chen said firmly. "No, it's not enough." My mother's composure finally shattered completely. "I gave up my career to raise her. I spent the best years of my life driving to soccer practices and helping with homework and making Halloween costumes. And this is how she repays me, by recording our private conversations, by turning Ethan against us, by sending us to prison." "Mrs. Sinclair, you're not helping your case," her attorney pleaded. "What case? They've already decided we're monsters. But we're not. We're parents who expected a return on investment. Every parent expects that we were just honest about it." She pointed at the jury. "How many of you expect your children to care for you in old age? How many helped with college, hoping they'd be supported later? We just formalized what everyone thinks but won't admit. The difference," Judge Chen interjected coldly, "is that most parents hope for voluntary support based on genuine relationships. They don't forge signatures, steal inheritances, attempt to have their children institutionalized, or teach others how to financially abuse their families." My mother laughed bitterly. "Voluntary support, right, because children are so eager to help their parents without pressure. We just acknowledged reality and planned accordingly. By committing multiple felonies," Judge Chen noted. "Please return to your seat." As my mother sat down, still muttering about ungrateful children, Judge Chen addressed the jury. "You've heard both defendants speak. Mr. Sinclair has admitted guilt and shown what appears to be genuine remorse. Mrs. Sinclair has doubled down on the attitudes that led to these crimes. Please consider their statements as you deliberate, not as mitigation, but as evidence of their mindsets." The jury filed out. We waited in tense silence for 3 hours before they returned. I held Sarah's hand on one side and Catherine's on the other, my grandmother's ring pressing into my palm. "Have you reached a verdict?" Judge Chen asked. "We have, Your Honor," the foreman replied. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of identity theft?" "Guilty." The list went on. Guilty of racketeering, guilty of extortion, guilty of conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, guilty of harassment, guilty of attempted false imprisonment, guilty on every single count. My mother shrieked at each verdict while my father sat with his head bowed. The gallery erupted in whispers and shuffling as reporters rushed to file their stories. "Sentencing will be held in 2 weeks," Judge Chen announced. "Given the severity of the crimes and the defendants being flight risks, bail is revoked. Defendants will remain in custody." As court officers approached with handcuffs, my mother made one last desperate plea. "Alondra, don't let them do this. Tell them you forgive us. We're your parents." I stood slowly meeting her wild eyes. "You were my parents." Past tense. "You chose to be my abusers instead. Now you're just convicted felons facing the consequences of your crimes." "You'll regret this," she screamed as they led her away. "When you're old and alone, you'll regret destroying your family." My father paused as they escorted him past. "She's wrong," he said quietly. "The only regret here is mine. I'm sorry, Alondra. It's too late and too little, but I'm sorry." I nodded once, acknowledging his words without offering forgiveness he hadn't asked for and didn't deserve. The courtroom slowly emptied until only my support team remained. Catherine was already fielding calls from reporters wanting statements. Sarah kept her arm around me as the magnitude of the moment sank in. "It's over," I whispered. "The trial's over," she corrected gently. "The healing is just beginning." Outside the courthouse, hundreds of supporters had gathered. Other victims of the Parents' Rights Alliance, their own trials pending or completed. Young adults who'd found strength to establish boundaries with manipulative families. Parents who were horrified by what mine had done and wanted to show that real parental love looked different. Carmen Silva stood at the front again, this time holding a sign that said, "Guilty verdicts don't erase trauma, but they're a good start." I gave a brief statement to the press thanking the prosecutors, the FBI, and everyone who'd supported me. I dedicated the victory to my grandmother, whose evidence had been crucial, and to all the victims still afraid to speak up. "This verdict doesn't undo the pain," I said. "It doesn't restore stolen money or repair broken trust, but it sends a clear message. Parental love is not ownership. Raising a child is not an investment expecting returns. And teaching others to exploit their children is a crime that will be punished." That evening, Morrison Tech hosted a quiet celebration. Not a party, but a gathering of people who'd become my chosen family. We shared a meal, told stories that had nothing to do with trials or trauma, and looked toward a future where my past no longer defined every moment. Marcus raised a glass. To Alondra, who showed us that standing up to abuse isn't just personal courage, it's community service. Your fight freed dozens of others. That's a legacy worth celebrating. As I looked around the table at faces who'd supported me without condition or expectation of return, I realized my mother had been wrong about one thing. I wouldn't be old and alone. I'd built a family based on respect, genuine care, and mutual support. It wasn't the family I'd been born into, but it was the family I'd chosen, and who'd chosen me in return. The war was over. My parents would spend over a decade in prison. The Parents' Rights Alliance was destroyed, its leaders facing their own trials. The money they'd stolen would be partially recovered through asset forfeiture and distributed among victims. But more importantly, the conversation had changed. Financial abuse by parents was no longer a taboo subject whispered about in shame. It was recognized, documented, and punished. Support systems were in place. Laws were being strengthened. My grandmother had seen this moment in her preparations, had known that truth and evidence would eventually prevail. As I twisted her ring on my finger, I felt her presence, not as a ghost or spiritual visitation, but as the culmination of her courage, made manifest in this victory. The verdict was guilty. Justice was served. And somewhere Eleanor Sinclair was finally at peace, knowing her granddaughter was free. 1 year later, I stood before an audience of 500 at the first national conference of the Financial Freedom Foundation, the organization that had grown from the ashes of my family's crimes. The hotel ballroom was filled with survivors, advocates, therapists, lawyers, and employers committed to ending parental financial abuse. A year ago, I sat in a courtroom watching my parents be sentenced for crimes that began with a simple demand: that I hand over my entire salary. I began, my voice steady and clear. Today we gather not as victims, but as catalysts for change. The foundation had been my grandmother's final gift made manifest. Using the inheritance she'd protected and additional funding from Morrison Tech and other progressive companies, we'd created a comprehensive support system for those escaping family financial abuse. Behind me, screens displayed our first-year statistics. 3,847 individuals provided emergency housing assistance. 1,256 legal consultations funded. 847 restraining orders filed. 423 criminal cases supported. 298 people successfully extracted from financial conservatorships. But numbers don't tell the whole story. I continued. Each statistic represents someone who said no more, someone who chose freedom over familiarity, independence over manipulation disguised as love. In the audience, I spotted familiar faces. Carmen Silva, now a successful marketing director who led our survivor support groups. Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd become our head of security consultation, teaching people how to document abuse safely. Even Ethan was there, fresh from his early release, working to earn redemption by counseling other golden children groomed to enable abuse. Sarah sat in the front row, beaming with pride. She'd left Morrison Tech 6 months ago to become the foundation's director of corporate partnerships, helping companies implement protection protocols for employees facing personal harassment. We've learned that financial abuse rarely exists in isolation, I explained. It's accompanied by emotional manipulation, gaslighting, violation of boundaries, and often escalates to criminal behavior. That's why our approach must be comprehensive. I clicked to the next slide showing our programs: emergency funds for those fleeing abusive families, legal clinics specializing in financial abuse cases, therapists trained in the specific trauma of parental exploitation, educational programs for high schools and colleges, teaching young adults to recognize early warning signs. But perhaps our most important work is changing the conversation. For too long, our society has treated family as sacred above criticism or accountability. We've guilted victims into silence with phrases like, "But they're your parents," or "family comes first." We've enabled abuse by prioritizing family unity over individual safety. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. These were people who'd heard those phrases, who'd been shamed for protecting themselves, who'd lost friends and extended family for refusing to be exploited. Today we declare that love is not ownership, that raising a child creates no debt beyond being raised in return, that family is a verb, not just a noun. It's how you treat people, not just who shares your DNA. The presentation continued with panels of expert survivor testimonies and workshops on everything from recognizing manipulation tactics to rebuilding life after estrangement. But the most powerful moment came during the closing ceremony. "We have a tradition here," I announced, "a ritual of liberation." Volunteers wheeled out a large metal drum, a safe, controlled burn barrel. Many of you brought items that represent your abuse: demand letters, guilt-inducing photos, manipulative emails, even court documents from failed attempts to break you. Tonight, if you choose, you can release their power. One by one, people approached. A young man burned the contract his parents had tried to force him to sign, giving them control of his startup. A woman tossed in photos her mother had used for social media manipulation. A couple together destroyed the invoices their parents had sent for raising them, itemized bills for childhood expenses. Ethan approached hesitantly, holding a thick folder. "These are the surveillance reports I compiled on my sister," he said into the microphone, voice shaking. "Evidence of the worst thing I've ever done, following orders I should have refused. I burn these not to hide from accountability, but to release the shame that keeps me from moving forward. I was a victim who became an accomplice, but I refuse to let that define my future." As the papers burned, he looked at me. We'd started meeting monthly for coffee, carefully rebuilding a relationship based on who we were becoming, not who we'd been forced to be. It wasn't easy, might never be complete, but it was honest. The ceremony continued until the barrel was full of ashes, the physical remnants of hundreds of attempts to control, manipulate, and exploit. As the last embers died, I returned to the podium. 10 years ago, my grandmother Eleanor saw what was happening in our family and began documenting it, knowing someday that evidence would be needed. She couldn't save herself, but she saved me, and through me, all of you. Tonight, I want to share something she wrote that we've adopted as our foundation motto. I pulled out her letter, reading the words that had become our rallying cry. "Real parents celebrate their children's independence, not scheme to destroy it." My parents are serving 13 and 11 years, respectively, for their crimes. The Parents' Rights Alliance has been dismantled, its leaders imprisoned or awaiting trial. But our work isn't done. Somewhere tonight, a young adult is being told they're selfish for wanting to keep their paycheck. A teenager is being groomed to believe they'll owe their parents everything. A family is teaching their children that love comes with invoices. I pause, looking out at 500 faces who understood this fight intimately. To those still trapped, we say, "You are not selfish. You are not ungrateful. You are not obligated to fund anyone's life but your own. Love that comes with a price tag isn't love. It's a transaction, and you have the right to decline that transaction." To parents watching, we say, "Your children are not your retirement plan. They are not investments expecting returns. They are individuals who deserve autonomy, respect, and the freedom to build their own lives. If you truly love them, celebrate their independence, support their growth, find joy in their success, without claiming ownership of it. The evening concluded with networking resource sharing and plans for the year ahead. We were expanding internationally, partnering with universities to create financial literacy programs that included recognizing abuse, working with legislators to strengthen laws protecting adult children from parental exploitation. As the crowd dispersed, Morrison Tech's leadership team approached. Marcus had an announcement. Alondra, when you started with us, you were a junior developer escaping a nightmare. You've become so much more, a leader, an advocate, a symbol of resilience. We'd like to offer you a position as our Chief Ethics Officer overseeing employee protection protocols and extending Morrison Tech's commitment to supporting our people's whole lives, not just their work hours. I accepted knowing this role would let me help others while continuing the technical work I loved. It was a future I'd never imagined when I'd first texted back my refusal to hand over my salary. Later that night, I stood on my apartment balcony. My own apartment paid for with my own money, decorated to my own taste, free from hidden cameras or manipulation. The city sparkled below, full of people living their own stories, facing their own challenges. My phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. I'm 18 and my parents just told me I'll be supporting them through college and beyond. I saw your story on the news. Is it really possible to say no? I typed back, yes, it's possible. It's difficult, it's painful, but it's possible, and you don't have to do it alone. I gave them the Foundation's hotline number, knowing they'd find support resources, and most importantly, validation that their desire for independence wasn't wrong. As I went to bed that night wearing my grandmother's ring that had become my talisman, I thought about the journey from that first confrontation to this moment. My family had tried to break me for refusing to be their personal ATM. Instead, they'd created a movement. Thousands of people were free because I'd said no. Laws were changed because we'd spoken up. Families were learning healthier dynamics because we'd exposed the toxic ones. My parents had wanted my salary. Instead, they'd funded a revolution with their crimes. The little girl who'd made Mother's Day cards and promised to always take care of family still existed within me. But she'd learned that taking care of family meant holding them accountable, that love without boundaries became abuse, and that sometimes the most caring thing you could do was refuse to enable exploitation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more families to help, more laws to change, more conversations to transform. But tonight, I was at peace. I'd kept my salary and my self-respect. I'd gained a chosen family who loved me without price tags. I'd turned personal trauma into public service. My grandmother had started this by documenting truth and protecting assets. I was continuing it by protecting people and changing systems. Together across the divide between life and death, we'd proven that love wasn't about ownership or obligation. Love was about wanting someone to be free, successful, and independent, even if that meant they walked away from you. Especially if that meant they walked away from you. That was the lesson worth teaching the world. And thanks to everyone who joined this fight, it was a lesson spreading further every day. Thank you for joining me on Alondra's journey. If her story resonated with you, if you've faced similar struggles with family financial abuse, or know someone who has, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What did you think of Alondra's choices? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family over money? How do we balance cultural expectations of supporting family with protecting our own financial future? Please leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. And if this story touched you or might help someone you know, please hit the like button and share it. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about people finding the courage to stand up for themselves and build the lives they deserve. Remember, you are not obligated to fund anyone else's life at the expense of your own dreams. Your success belongs to you, and choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the first step toward healing an entire family system. Until next time, stand strong in your truth and know that you deserve relationships based on love, not ledgers. With hope and solidarity, your storyteller.